Chapter 935. At this moment, the strange emotions in their eyes were clearly visible. They hadn't expected Lu Feng to say something like that. How could he say the word respect? They'd all witnessed Lu Feng's existence before. That was true greatness, true terror, and extreme. And yet, he'd still said the word respect. It was clear that Lu Feng truly held the eternal sacred land in high regard. You admire the eternal sacred land. You must be admiring someone from the eternal sacred land, then. According to you, it was only after you saw the eternal sacred land that you thought of this person. That person must be a great existence from the eternal sacred land. He must be the prime. The Holy Lord had only heard a few sentences from Lu Feng, but he had already understood all of this. His wisdom and knowledge were indeed in line with his abilities. Yes, the prime I admire is the prime of the eternal sacred land. Lu Feng spoke resolutely and decisively, without the slightest hesitation. He was a great Holy Lord. For the sake of countless living beings, he ultimately chose to seal himself, using his own strength to suppress countless demonic creatures. He had experienced countless eras, a dry and dull guardian, and had endured millions upon millions of torments. But he's never given up. He's still here. His greatness is truly worthy of my admiration. In an instant, the two immortal masters fell silent. They looked at each other and finally nodded their heads. Lu Feng, you're talking about the great being from the ancient End era, aren't you? You're talking about the invincible immortal Lord from the ancient End era, aren't you? The dangerous eternal immortal Lord from the ancient End era. Lu Feng nodded his head gently. That's him. Before you, he was known as the first immortal Lord, the eternal immortal Lord. Like you, he reached the 32nd level of the eternal immortal Lord. He was the greatest existence beneath the 33rd level of the ultimate heavens. Someone as great as him should be able to enjoy the glory and splendor of millions of people. He should be able to enjoy the worship of all living beings. But he didn't. He didn't do that. He chose to remain silent and protect. The two immortal masters lightly nodded their heads. They all admired the mighty eternal immortal Lord from the bottom of their hearts. The eternal immortal Lord of the End era, was truly a legendary figure. His greatness was truly unparalleled. His methods can be said to be the model for any existence. Moreover, the eternal immortal master is a symbol of an era. He is the most famous immortal master among all the immortal masters. Of course, the eternal immortal master was famous not only because he was the first immortal master to reach the 32nd heaven, but also because he had a disciple, a great disciple. Lu Feng was slightly surprised. He looked around at the two of them and asked in confusion, "Disciple? What disciple?" If the existence of a disciple could become the most famous existence, then the existence of this disciple was probably infinitely great. Lu Feng could also imagine this. In the next moment, the two of them smiled gently and spoke slowly. Actually, you know this disciple as well. Furthermore, your relationship with him is also very complicated. He is also an incomparably great existence and also an incomparably shocking existence. His strength is equally shocking, and he is one of the most respected existences since the beginning of time. Lu Feng was silent for a moment. After a moment, he seemed to have thought of something, and an indescribable glow appeared in his eyes. He looked at the two of them, smiled gently, and said slowly, "The person you are talking about, is it him? Is it, Emperor? Emperor, it could only be an emperor." Lu Feng was here, and he had nothing to do with anyone. And the only one who had anything to do with him was the most respected existence since the beginning of time. It could only be the ultimate kings. Apart from the 5 ultimate kings, no one else met the requirement. But among the 5 ultimate kings, only 2 were related to Lu Feng. They were the Immortal King and the Demon King. However, the relationship between the two final kings and him had happened in the original universe. The people here would not, should not, and could not possibly know about it. Therefore, the only one who could be, in everyone's mind, was the Emperor. Only the Emperor was the last possible existence that they believed to be. Therefore, when the sovereign immortal master said these words, Lu Feng immediately thought of it. Hearing Lu Feng's guess, the sovereign immortal master nodded slightly. But there was no change in his expression. Actually, he knew, and he also understood that Lu Feng would definitely be able to guess. Back then, the Emperor seemed to have gone through some shocking transformation. When the ancient End era was revived, he lost his memory, and finally, he was taken in as a disciple by the eternal immortal master. After becoming his disciple, the Emperor was indeed very powerful and great. He displayed shocking combat power, and it was shocking and shocking. He was almost an undefeatable existence. Finally, at the end of the ancient End era, when he became the virtual king, his memory was completely awakened. It was then that many people realized that the eternal immortal master's incomparably heaven-defying disciple was the strongest of the 5 ultimate kings. He was the Emperor. Silence. Truly endless silence. Lu Feng hadn't expected things to turn out this way. The eternal immortal master is really quite famous. Lu Feng smiled softly and looked at the eternal sacred land in front of him. All right. Let's go in. I think he's already sensed my presence. He's coming out soon. He was referring to the current immortal master, the current eternal immortal master. As an immortal master, he could naturally control everything around him. Although he still couldn't grasp the secrets of the sacred land, he could still sense the changes in his surroundings. Therefore, the eternal immortal master should be able to sense their arrival. As expected, the eternal immortal master appeared in front of them in the next moment. The eternal immortal master was silent for a moment as he looked at the two. After a moment, he nodded slightly. I understand what you mean, Sovereign. Let him come. It's time for the final moment. It's time for us to truly face everything. As he spoke, he turned and walked directly into the sacred land. Lu Feng smiled softly as he watched the eternal immortal master's footsteps. In the next moment, he also slowly walked over, a strange look in his eyes. Soon, under the watchful eyes of countless geniuses and immortal kings, Lu Feng and the 2 immortal masters slowly landed on the ground. In their eyes, there was a look of scrutiny. Many people didn't know about the sudden arrival of these 2 people. But after a moment, several of them abruptly knelt down in the direction of the sovereign immortal master, their eyes filled with reverence. Greetings, sovereign immortal master. Greetings, sovereign immortal master. Sovereign immortal master. This was the sovereign immortal master. Countless people were shocked and horrified. They looked at the sovereign immortal master's position, their expressions filled with boundless shock. 3 sacred lands, 3 sovereigns, 3 immortal masters. Every one of them was an incomparably noble existence. However, many of the peak experts knew that among the current 3 holy lands, the strongest power was actually the sovereign holy land. This was because the immortal master of the sovereign sacred land was a mighty existence of the 32 heavens. He was truly an invincible existence. Throughout the endless eras, he was also one of the greatest experts, a great existence that everyone looked up to. The sovereign immortal master is a truly invincible existence. After the end of the immortal devil era, he was at the pinnacle of the immortal masters. Since ancient times, other than the eternal immortal master of the ancient End era and the chaos immortal master of the primordial era, no other immortal master could reach such a level and be comparable to him. This is the sovereign immortal master, the publicly acknowledged number 1 expert of the current era. The publicly acknowledged number 1 expert of the current era. This was the sovereign immortal master. This was the treatment that the sovereign immortal master received. Hearing these people's words, countless people knelt down in unison. All of them knelt down in the direction of the sovereign immortal master. Although the sovereign immortal master ruled over the sovereign sacred land, it had nothing to do with them. But these people weren't idiots. If such a great existence wanted to punish them, it would be a piece of cake. Even the eternal immortal master wouldn't object to it. Moreover, these people also admired and worshipped the sovereign immortal master, the publicly acknowledged #1 expert of the current era. Looking at these people, the sovereign immortal master smiled faintly. He slowly raised his hand and helped the people up from the ground. He looked at Lu Feng and nodded gently. Lu Feng, on the other hand, was silent for a moment before he gently nodded his head. In the next moment, he walked towards the gate of heaven and earth that stood silently in the sky, as if it would never change. Countless people looked at Lu Feng quietly. To be honest, they really didn't know who Lu Feng was, nor had they heard of such a person. But after seeing the complete equality between him and the sovereign immortal master, these people understood that Lu Feng was a person of great status. But when he descended, Lu Feng had already dispersed all his power. Right now, he was merely a pinnacle heavenly immortal. Such power was nothing in the eyes of those pinnacle experts. Seeing Lu Feng walk and finally arrive in front of the gate of heaven and earth, many people revealed looks of understanding and confusion. They understood because they thought that Lu Feng wanted to test his aptitude. But they were also confused because these people knew that there was also a gate of heaven and earth in the sovereign sacred land. There was also a gate of heaven and earth in the sovereign sacred land. So Lu Fenglai shouldn't be testing his aptitude here. But other than testing his aptitude, they really couldn't think of any other reason. After all, the gate of heaven and earth had no other purpose other than testing one's aptitude. However, when they saw the two supreme immortal masters quietly standing beside Lu Feng this time, they understood that there must be something important going on. When the two supreme immortal masters appear at the same time to guard him, it can't be just testing one's aptitude. Of course, if this monster is the ultimate king, then it might be possible. But does the ultimate king need to test his aptitude? I really don't understand. They didn't understand. They really didn't. But the eternal immortal Lord did. The eternal immortal Lord understood. Because the eternal immortal master knew everything. Like the sovereign immortal master, he had the foundation of a sacred land as his backing. He had the heritage of a sacred land as the source of everything he knew. And between the three sacred lands they were all the same. The three sacred lands were almost equal. Therefore, what the sovereign immortal master knew, the eternal immortal master knew as well. He naturally knew what was inside the gate of heaven and earth. Faintly, there was an incomparable excitement in his eyes. The eternal immortal master had been waiting for this day for far too long. He had already known everything when he had spoken with the sovereign immortal master. He also believed that there would be a truly terrifying calamity in this era. In fact, it could even be said that he was certain of it. Therefore, the eternal immortal master was extremely excited about Lu Feng's appearance. Of course, he was even more excited than the sovereign immortal master. All of this was because he knew that Lu Feng would be able to enter the final 18 levels of the Tower of Trials and obtain the 3 Futu essences. Obtaining the 3 Futu essences also meant that Lu Feng would be able to summon Futu's true form. Futu's existence meant only one thing to the eternal immortal master. It was the Demon Buster. When the eternal immortal master had perished, he had barged into the Yellow Springs continent in order to protect countless lives. He had sacrificed himself to seal the ancient battlefield. For the eternal sacred land, this was a supreme honor, but also a source of grief. Their hatred for the demonic creatures was the deepest among the 3 sacred lands. The eternal immortal master had been the first and only great being to enter the 32nd level of the sacred lands. However, such a great existence had fallen. He had fallen because of these demons. Therefore, the eternal sacred land's hatred for the demonic creatures was without a doubt the greatest among the three sacred lands. Lu Feng stared at the gates of heaven and earth in silence. His eyes were extremely calm, without the slightest hint of disturbance. The others were also quietly watching him, waiting for him to do something. Finally, Lu Feng moved under everyone's watchful eyes. He had finally arrived before the gates of heaven and earth. In the final moment, he had made contact with it. In an instant, countless ripples occurred, causing an indescribable change in the heavens and earth. Everyone's souls trembled uncontrollably. A vast power seemed to have been born in the void. It seemed to have given birth to a shocking light and true meaning. Endless majesty was born, indescribable and soul-shaking. It was a sight to behold, a sight that shook the very soul. What's going on? Just like back in the Paragon Holy Grounds, at this moment, after many people saw this scene, they were also extremely shocked and confused. No one answered, and no one explained anything. Other than the eternal immortal Master, no one else knew the reason for all of this. Finally, the confrontation of powerful auras had entered an indescribable level. Cracks began to appear on the gates of heaven and earth, followed by a sense of awe. The gates of heaven and earth, the gates of heaven and earth. How? The gates of heaven and earth have shattered. Under the horrified gazes of countless people, the gate of heaven and earth was shattered into pieces and vanished into nothingness. The eternal sacred land's spirit chi plummeted at an alarming rate. A black hole of power had appeared after the gates of heaven and earth shattered. The appearance of the black hole caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Apart from the geniuses and monsters, there were also many immortal kings present. They were all incredibly powerful existences who knew a great deal about the sacred land. Therefore, they recognized the existence of the black hole with a single glance. It was a black hole of power. The final product of the black hole was a power crystal like this. How many great existences can it create? A power crystal had heaven-defying effects. It was far, far more valuable than a 12th rank divine item. Even immortal masters would be tempted by such an item. But in the next moment, they watched with wide eyes as Lu Feng absorbed the power crystal into his body and soul. Who is he, really? Why does he have the right to take the power crystal? No one will hold him accountable for shattering the gates of heaven and earth. But what right does he have to take the power crystal? No one could maintain their composure in the face of an incomparable divine item like the power crystal. They all wanted a piece of the action. However, it was a pity that Lu Feng ignored the roars of these people. His footsteps were still the same as before, incomparably light and steady as he walked towards the location of the three immortal lords. Many were dissatisfied and continued to roar with hostility. However, they didn't dare act recklessly. This was the eternal sacred land, where the eternal immortal Master and the sovereign immortal Master were present. Moreover, they saw that Lu Feng had been brought here by the sovereign immortal Master. The sovereign immortal Master was widely acknowledged as the most powerful expert in the world. These people didn't have the right to act rashly in front of him. Of course, if this wasn't the eternal sacred land, these people wouldn't have dared to say such things. Hearing the commotion behind him, the eternal immortal Master was still as silent as ever. He didn't say anything. He just waited quietly, watching Lu Feng's presence. Lu Feng met his gaze. After a moment of silence, he chuckled softly. At the next moment, boundless power was completely unleashed, causing the entire world to enter an indescribable state of world-shaking tremors. Many monstrous geniuses and geniuses were already dumbfounded, and many other immortal kings and immortal venerables were also completely shocked to the extreme. They mumbled these two words, but they couldn't say anything after that because they really didn't know what to say. Previously, these people had clearly seen Lu Feng's cultivation base. It was only the power of a peak heaven immortal. No matter how powerful he was, It was already shocking that he could at most fight against a golden immortal. After all, there was an insurmountable gap between a sky immortal and a golden immortal. However, what Lu Feng did next was to give them a tight slap across the face. His current sky power was limitless. Many people could clearly feel it. This was definitely a kind of peak, a kind of terror and shock. Perfection. This is definitely the power of perfection. This is the invincible power that only immortal venerables in the perfection realm can use. This young man, he's actually comparable to the most powerful expert on a continent. Compared to the most powerful expert on a continent, this was indeed the case. This was truly the case. Because, other than the most powerful expert on a continent, there was no other existence who could use the sky power of immortal venerables in the perfection realm. This was shocking, indescribable, and made people's souls tremble. After all, they could feel Lu Feng's young age. At this moment, countless people finally thought of something. They looked at Lu Feng with even more shock. Could it be that he is? He definitely is, he definitely is. He must be one of the four great existences. No wonder, no wonder. These people understood that Lu Feng must be the ultimate king. Because, other than the ultimate king, no one else could achieve such an extreme increase in strength. That was the only thought they had. Lu Feng didn't say anything. After displaying his strength, he didn't need to say anything more. After experiencing the history of conquering the 33 heavens, Lu Feng had seen too many killing methods. With the help of the sky power, he could now be considered an invincible existence below the immortal master level. Once he used the ultimate immortal technique of 1 billion mortal worlds, 1 billion immortals, he would be able to clash with any other immortal lord, except for the eternal immortal lord of the ancient end era and the supreme immortal lord of the current era, who had reached the 32 heavens. As for the guide, who had just entered the Overlord era and was at the 30th heaven, there was even a possibility that he could be killed. Therefore, Lu Feng was no longer afraid of anything. He treated all existences with a completely equal attitude. The current him was truly qualified to do so. He had already reached the half-step to the great success realm. Seeing Lu Feng lie in front of him, the eternal immortal master nodded slightly and turned to leave. However, before he left, Lu Feng's voice suddenly rang out. "What is your relationship with the eternal immortal master of the ancient end era?" Hearing this, the eternal immortal master paused. He turned to look at Lu Feng with an indescribable look in his eyes. Lu Feng looked at him. He was certain of their relationship. The eternal immortal master in front of him was too similar to the eternal immortal master of the ancient end era he had seen in the land of sealed demons. Moreover, his bloodline must be very strong. Of course, that was not the case. Sure enough, the eternal immortal master's voice rang out slowly. "That is my primogenitor." Lu Feng nodded slightly. In the three great holy lands, the position of Holy Lord was not inherited through bloodline, but by someone who was capable. Therefore, to be able to make his own descendant the eternal immortal master was proof that the eternal immortal master's descendant was very capable. "Have you seen my primogenitor before?" The eternal immortal master was not an idiot. Some things only needed to be explained briefly before he completely understood. Since Lu Feng had asked such a question, it proved that Lu Feng had recognized some connection between him and his primogenitor. The only connection, other than the fact that they were both eternal immortal masters, was their looks. When the eternal immortal master was young, he had seen traces of his primogenitor. At that time, he had understood that he and his primogenitor looked very, very alike. Lu Feng looked at the eternal immortal master and smiled softly. At this point, he had nothing to hide. "Yes, not long ago, I saw the eternal immortal master in the land of Seal, in the abyss of oblivion." They were all stunned, truly stunned. It was not just the eternal immortal master. Even the sovereign immortal master, the guide beside him, and countless others were all stunned. They looked at Lu Feng as if they could not believe that this was real. Lu Feng smiled faintly and nodded his head firmly. That's right, the eternal immortal master is not dead. The great being of the ancient End era is not dead. He is still guarding the land of Seal in the land of Yellow Springs. He is still guarding it for the sake of all living beings. The sovereign immortal master looked at Lu Feng and finally understood why Lu Feng had said that he admired the eternal immortal master. It turned out that he had really seen him. Previously, when Lu Feng had said that the eternal immortal master of the ancient End era was guarding the land of sealed demons, the sovereign immortal master had thought that he was using his remaining will to guard it. But now that he heard Lu Feng's words, the sovereign immortal master understood that when he said he was guarding it, he was really guarding it with his real body. The great being of the ancient End era, the invincible immortal master, was actually still alive. Chapter 936. My progenitor, is he still alive? As an immortal master, he was never one to lose his composure. However, he couldn't contain his excitement when he heard this. The eternal immortal master of the ancient End era was a legend. He was one of the greatest legends in the entire second universe. Apart from the 5 ultimate kings, the eternal immortal master of the ancient End era was the most legendary existence of all. Compared to the former Chaos Immortal Master and the current Exalted Immortal Master, the eternal immortal master's legend was even more glorious. After all, he was the master of the most powerful emperor of the 5 ultimate kings. He was also the only one of the 5 ultimate kings who had his master's name. Without a doubt, the eternal immortal master of the ancient End era was a legend. He was the absolute pride of the entire second universe and the eternal sacred land. After hearing Lu Feng's words, how could the eternal immortal master, as the descendant of such a great being, not be excited? Lu Feng nodded slightly at the excited eternal immortal master. He does indeed exist. In fact, he's still alive. When I first entered the sealed land, I met him in the deepest part of the Yellow Springs continent. Thanks to his help, I gained unimaginable benefit. The transformation of Tong Tianfutu's martial Dao replica had undoubtedly helped Lu Feng break through. After unlocking the 5th level of Tong Tianfutu, he'd gained the upper limit of the 11th rank. This kind of benefit was incomparable to anything else. Therefore, Lu Feng had truly gained an astonishing amount of benefit. Because I extracted something, the eternal immortal master is now in the sealed land. He's helping me guard it. When I reach great success, I can return there and help him suppress all of the demonic creatures. He'll be able to regain his freedom. The eternal immortal master fell silent when he heard this. Excitement flashed through his eyes. However, when he saw the countless living beings around him, he forcibly suppressed all the excitement in his heart. He looked at Lu Feng and finally nodded slightly. I know, these simple words made Lu Feng feel a little admiration for the eternal immortal Lord. Lu Feng knew that if he had been in the eternal immortal Lord's shoes, he would have done everything he could to save the eternal immortal Lord. However, the eternal immortal master in front of him didn't. He just said the 4 words I know. I know that as the current eternal immortal master, there are countless living beings at my side who need my protection. I have to think for them. I can't be impulsive, Therefore, I will endure, I will wait. With Lu Feng in tow, he walked straight ahead. Lu Feng didn't say anything. He followed closely behind the eternal immortal master. After a long journey, they finally arrived in front of the pagoda. The 3 great holy lands have the 3 great trial towers. The existence of the 3 great trial towers is where the secrets of the 3 great holy lands lie. As for the 3 great holy lands, the 3 great trial pagodas are different in nature. In the sovereign sacred lands, one's physical body is tempered. In the eternal sacred land, one's willpower is tempered. It's a crazy test of willpower. The pain here is similar to the pain in the sovereign holy ground. Back then, there were two people who entered the 17th level. Lu Feng nodded. He knew one of them. It had to be the Emperor. Other than the Emperor, no one else could do this. Back then, the Emperor had suppressed the godly monarchs, the immortal monarchs, and the sage monarchs and demon monarchs to become the only one among the 5 ultimate monarchs to surpass the others because he had reached the 17th level in all 3 of the trial towers of the 3 sacred lands. Therefore, of the 2 people who had reached the 17th floor of the Eternal Trial Tower, one of them had to be the Emperor. In addition to the Emperor, Lu Feng also understood that the other person was the ultimate king. After experiencing the Supreme Tower, he naturally knew. He was sure that other than the final king who had experienced countless trials, it was impossible for other existences to have the strength to enter the 15th floor and above. The eternal immortal master nodded slightly. The other one is indeed the final king. He is the demon king. Countless images flashed through Lu Feng's mind. He saw a young, cold man, a man filled with madness and bloodlust. In some ways, his dominance was even more terrifying than Lu Feng's. His madness was even more extreme than Lu Feng's. The Demon King. Of the 5 great holy kings, the one that Lu Feng remembered the most was the Demon King. This was because he had once fought against the Demon King. The Demon King is possible. His insanity was also the strongest when it came to his willpower and pain tolerance. I didn't expect him to be the one to enter this place. Lu Feng's words caused the 3 immortal masters to be slightly stunned. They could tell what Lu Feng meant from Lu Feng's tone. They could tell that Lu Feng might really know the Demon King. Lu Feng, do you know the Demon King? Lu Feng smiled and nodded. Once upon a time, when I had just become the final king, I fought with his clone. Lu Feng didn't say anything else. He didn't want to say anything else. He just smiled and looked at the trial tower. The 3 immortal masters fell silent as they looked at Lu Feng. Although he didn't say anything, they could guess the answer. After all, Lu Feng had said that he had fought with the Demon King's clone when he had just become the final king. After all, that had been the Demon King's clone, not the Demon King's main body. Lu Feng had been the final king. However, these people couldn't have imagined that Lu Feng had fought under a stronghold. Is this the trial tower of willpower? Generally speaking, there wasn't much difference between the Eternal Trial Tower and the Ultimate Trial Tower. However, there were some slight differences in the details. Lu Feng sensed that the Eternal Trial Tower was filled with a mysterious aura. It was a lingering, abstruse aura. The Ultimate Trial Tower, on the other hand, was filled with an incomparably luxurious and dignified aura. The layout was basically the same. However, because of this difference, Lu Feng felt that the 2 trial towers were really different. Lu Feng, this is the trial tower. I heard that you have already analyzed the final secret of the trial tower. It should be the same here. However, whether you will be able to obtain everything still depends on you. The trial tower of willpower is different from the physical body. After all, the physical body's existence actually tests one's aptitude to a certain extent. Your aptitude is already heaven-defying. Therefore, passing the physical body's test is also relatively easy. Lu Feng fell silent. Then, he smiled faintly but didn't explain anything. Many people thought that a freak like him had never been defeated and that everything had been smooth sailing. After all, a freak basically meant that everything had been smooth sailing. They had powerful forces to protect them, and they had everything that made them stronger than their peers. Therefore, they hadn't experienced any disasters or setback. Generally speaking, those who had never experienced any disasters or setbacks had ordinary willpower. This was what they thought. In their eyes and hearts, Lu Feng was inferior to the 5 ultimate kings. However, it was a pity that these people would never understand what Lu Feng's true strength was. What was his true strength? Smiling faintly, Lu Feng nodded. He looked at the three of them and the countless people behind him. Without hesitation, Lu Feng took a step forward and walked into the trial of willpower that was full of pain and suffering. Can he really do it? Can he really carry the banner of this era? The eternal immortal master asked after a moment of silence. He really didn't know if this was the right thing to do. Looking at the eternal immortal master, the supreme immortal master smiled faintly. There was an indescribable emotion in his eyes. It was a combination of too many complicated emotions. You have never seen his strength with your own eyes. How could you possibly know his greatness? Although I don't know him very well, but in my opinion, he, Lu Feng, is indeed an existence that is qualified to shoulder all of this. After all, he is the one chosen by Futu. You shouldn't doubt Futu's choice, should you? The eternal immortal master fell silent. Though he didn't say anything, his expression was still troubled. When he saw this, the supreme immortal master smiled. It was an incomparably calm smile. Actually, you don't have to worry about anything. The trial towers of the three sacred lands are sacred relics of eternity. If they disappear, it means that the three sacred lands have reached the end of their era. What you're worried about is whether Lu Feng can carry the banner of this era. Can he lead us into the future and overcome that unparalleled tribulation? Actually, there's no need to worry about that. If he can't, then the 18th floor of the Tower of Eternity won't open. If it doesn't open, then the eternal trials won't open either. Therefore, your worries are unfounded. If Lu Feng couldn't do it, then the eternal sacred land wouldn't lose anything. It would just be an ordinary trial. The eternal immortal master paused, then smiled softly. He knew that he'd been overthinking things. The eternal immortal master turned around and looked at the Tower of Eternity in front of him. His expression relaxed slightly. He knew that he'd been overthinking things, but when he turned around to look at the Tower of Eternity, his smile instantly stiffened. This was a kind of complete rigidity, an indescribable expression. Chapter 937. How is this possible? He wasn't the only one. Many people around him had the same expression on their faces. They were all dumbfounded. That's because the 5th floor of the tower has already lit up. Compared to the Supreme Tower, which tested one's physical strength, the Tower of Eternity, which tested one's will, was much harder to pass. On average, the speed of passing each level of the Tower of Eternity was twice as fast as the Supreme Tower. But now, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Which ultimate king is this young man? The ultimate kings all came here before, but they weren't as fast as he is now. Countless people were dumbfounded, then began to discuss wildly. At this moment, the eternal immortal master looked at the Supreme Lord, who had recovered from his shock and was now smiling happily. As expected, I was too short-sighted. You are so much stronger than me. Lu Feng's performance couldn't even be described as stunning. This was simply too outrageous. He had gone up the first 5 levels in the blink of an eye. It seemed that the first 5 levels of the trial of will were nothing to Lu Feng. When the 5 ultimate kings had entered this place, they had paused for a while before finally reaching the next level. But Lu Feng hadn't been hindered in the slightest. How could the many existences not be shocked by such a scene? While they were talking and thinking, Lu Feng created another miracle. If not for the fact that all the existences here had entered it before and knew about the terrifying trials inside, they might really have believed that this Tower of Eternity was just an ordinary huge tower. There were no trials or hardships in it. However, they knew very well that this was impossible. This was completely impossible. The trials and tribulations that existed within were absolutely shocking and frightening. Many immortal kings, immortal venerables, and even some heaven-defying geniuses had entered all 3 of the trial towers. They naturally knew how terrifying these trials were. Seeing Lu Feng defying the heavens like this, they were truly shocked and at a loss. They really didn't know what to say. In an instant, many existences went crazy again, because in less than half a day's time, Lu Feng had already surpassed the limits of the monstrous geniuses at the Emperor level. He had actually directly entered the 14th level. Such speed had never been seen before. These people naturally knew the pain of the 13th floor. Even if the ultimate monarch came here, it would be impossible for him to pass through without some time. However, Lu Feng still ignored him and continued to walk past him. What kind of terrifying willpower does this require? I was wrong. I was really wrong. Lu Feng, Emperor Lu Feng. The most terrifying thing about him is not his aptitude, but his willpower. The eternal immortal master's eyes flashed with an indescribable light. The eternal sacred land was a manifestation of its will. Clearly, they valued the willpower of a monstrous genius more. They didn't know how frightening Lu Feng's martial Dao talent was, but they saw Lu Feng's willpower clearly. It was completely unexplainable. It had surpassed all limits. With such aptitude and willpower, if someone like him can't carry the banner of an era, who can? I approve of Lu Feng. The eternal immortal master had truly approved of Lu Feng. Approval meant support. The Sovereign Prime had told the eternal immortal master about Lu Feng before. He knew that once the space-time tunnel was opened, the second universe would be connected to the primal universe. When that happened, they would enter the second universe to help Lu Feng fight God Slayer. Is God Slayer really that powerful? Is there an immortal master behind it? As immortal lords, they naturally knew how terrifying immortal lord-level existences were. The moment two immortal lords clashed, the resulting shockwaves would cause even time and space to tremble. If they weren't careful, an entire continent would be turned into ruins. In this space-time with countless inheritances, it's very difficult for an immortal master to be born. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any immortal masters in the primal universe. The sovereign immortal master fell silent, a strange look in his eyes. I'm not sure about that either. Also, to be able to trigger the phenomena of immortals and demons, give them sentience, and make them return to their true forms. Even we don't have such a method. The 16th floor. In the blink of an eye, Lu Feng had arrived at the 16th floor. Such speed completely stunned the people below. Lu Feng already knew that of the 5 ultimate kings, the Demon King was the fastest in the Tower of Eternity, followed by the emperors. The Demon King had taken 3 days to get here. But he, Lu Feng, had used less than half a day's time to arrive. It could be said that he had practically walked straight up without encountering any obstacles. This was something that absolutely no one could believe. Feeling the indescribable sense of terror and majesty in this empty 16th floor, Lu Feng's face contorted slightly. However, that was all there was to it. He was still moving frantically, and his footsteps did not stop at all. The 16th floor was indeed terrifying, even more so than the previous 15 floors combined. But it was a pity that this was nothing to Lu Feng, because what Lu Feng was best at, what he was most proud of, was his willpower. He had experienced so many things, walked through countless deaths and depravity, and witnessed so many alternations of death. What he had experienced was unimaginable to anyone. Perhaps the eternal immortal master thought that his life had been smooth sailing, but he would never have thought that Lu Feng had been so miserable. Back then, Lu Feng had not been able to become the ultimate king he was now. Even becoming a martialist had been a luxurious dream. His bloodline was sealed, his body was weak, and his soul was bound. It was impossible for him to become a telekinesis master. It was also almost impossible for him to become a beginner warrior. However, Lu Feng had not given up. After going through the metamorphosis of the Empyrean Futu, he had started to soar. From an ordinary planet-level genius, he had slowly become a star, a galaxy, and a genius of the Federation level. Then, in the Massacre Abyss, he had defied the heavens and become the Emperor of Massacre. He had even become the king of massacre. Finally, in the extraterritorial battlefield, a world full of confrontation and death, he had relied on his own strength to look down on heaven and earth. Step by step, he had become the ultimate king. He had become the ultimate king who had stood at the pinnacle since ancient times. If someone had known about Lu Feng's experiences, they would have said that luck had changed him. It had given him so much that he had become the Lu Feng he was today. However, the person who had spoken those words had only seen Lu Feng's external conditions. They had not seen the real situation. For Lu Feng to be able to reach where he was today, his talent and fortuitous encounters could not be ignored. However, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was Lu Feng's heart and will. Had it not been for these, Lu Feng would have perished and turned into ashes in the countless confrontations and extreme confrontations. The incomparably great and invincible Emperor Lu Feng would not have existed. I was able to be reborn in the midst of so much pain and suffering. I have experienced so much. How can the current me admit defeat? Madness, endless madness. This was a test of willpower. However, it was a pity that Lu Feng did not feel the breakthrough of his great devil true body. He was still the same as before. He had not entered the final realm of the great devil true body, the invincible great devil true body. Even so, Lu Feng was content with what he had, because his improvement was already very, very fast. Lu Feng sighed deeply as he looked at the teleportation point in the middle of the endless depth. He continued to drag his heavy footsteps forward. Half a day, it was really just half a day. He actually entered the 17th level. This kind of speed is simply unheard of. I'm afraid that he's the fastest in all of history. I really did not expect that this Lu Feng was actually such a terrifying ultimate king. He should not be one of the 5 ultimate kings. This should be a brand new ultimate king. It seems like a shocking change is going to happen in this era. Even the ultimate king, such a terrifying and enchanting ultimate king, was born. It seems like nothing is impossible in this era. Countless immortal kings and immortal venerables started to discuss. They were all filled with an indescribable feeling. They were really shocked. They were all worried about the unforeseen events that might occur in this era. Unforeseen events and disasters are actually opportunities as well. If he can get through it smoothly, his future will definitely be limitless. And such a monstrous genius, I think he was born for the sake of the final disaster. It had to be said that some people's foresight was very strong. They were indeed able to see the future and many unknown things. This time, it was obviously the same. They had already seen through it. The eruption of monstrous geniuses would definitely bring about some shocking changes. And the birth of a monstrous genius like Lu Feng was to get through that disaster. This was actually a path of hope left behind in the endless time and space for the endless living beings. These people were all discussing, but they did not see the figures struggling unyieldingly on the 17th level. Chapter 938. Lu Feng's willpower was incomparably terrifying, and he was fearless in the face of anything. However, at this moment, when he was enduring this endless test of willpower, he still felt his soul trembling. After all, this was the 17th level, the last level. Back then, the Demon King and the Emperor were completely stopped at this level and failed completely? As expected, the willpower here is really too terrifying. If I hadn't experienced so much, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to enter the last level. 9 lives of illusion, hundreds of millions of tests of life and death. Lu Feng's willpower was strong enough to withstand anything. Of course, the real reason why he was able to hold on and speak in such a torturous situation was not only the 9 lives fantasy, but also the hundreds of millions of life and death tests in the core area of the massacre abyss. At that time, it was truly endless life and death, causing his physical body to disappear, and even his soul to disappear. The only thing that truly existed was his willpower. It could be said that because of the hundreds of millions of tests of life and death, his willpower had become unprecedentedly terrifying and powerful. Therefore, although the pain on this level was more terrifying than what he had experienced in Supreme Tower previously, he was still able to endure it. However, Lu Feng was able to face it calmly. He was even able to speak in such an environment. Alright, let's persevere for a while more. Ahead of us is the starting point of my strength. Ahead of us, I will enter an even stronger state. The light in his eyes became even brighter and brighter. Just a little bit more and he would be able to touch it. He would be able to touch the final destination. There, he would obtain the second type of mythical origin, 1/3 of the Tongtian Fuda origin. At that time, he would transform again. After obtaining the second type of mythical origin, I'll be able to enter the two great mythical origins, the two divine kings' taboo mythical domains. At that time, I'll have 3 great taboo mythical domains, and I'll be an overlord of an era. An overlord of an era. This was a great name in the primal universe. Throughout the countless eras since ancient times, the total number of epic overlords that had been born had barely reached 10. In this era of the greatest technological civilization, in this era that was known as the greatest miracle in history, there were at most 3 overlords of an era. The great demonic Sky Lord, Lord of the Netherworld, the first divine king. The 3 invincible existences are the overlords of the epoch. They are the greatest existences among the 3 peak overlord races. They are also the greatest existences in this era, excluding the sovereign personages. Soon I will become an existence on the same level as them. They were existences on the same level, and Lu Feng also knew that he was even more powerful than before. His physical body was unprecedented. It belonged to the most powerful physical body. Until now, he had not truly used his physical body to its limit because he did not dare. He really did not dare to use the most terrifying power of power. His physical body was filled with the essence of destruction. It was an invincible great demon battle constitution that could destroy the world. It could be said that once it was used to the limit, it was not impossible for it to directly evolve into a great calamity. Therefore, unless there was really no other choice, Lu Feng would not use the most extreme level. However, even if he did not use the most extreme level of power, his strength was still unimaginable. Once he used his physical body, no matter how powerful it was, he was still an invincible existence in the realm of physical body. The forbidden mythological domain of battle power was also an invincible domain. Therefore, when Lu Feng casually comprehended a type of mythological domain and entered the realm of an overlord, with the invincibility of the forbidden mythological domain of battle power and the freakish strength of the forbidden mythological domain of battle power and the mythological domain of physical body, he would definitely be in existence of at least 32 levels. 32 levels of heaven. This was already close to being unrivaled. It was an existence that could contend against the supreme immortal lord, the strongest immortal lord since ancient times. At the thought of this, Lu Feng's eyes shone brightly. His steps became firmer and his speed became even more terrifying. Finally, there were only a few steps left. It was really just a few simple steps. Now, Lu Feng's willpower was still forcefully holding on. However, his eyes had started to tremble uncontrollably and were slowly closing. However, Lu Feng's eyes still had a faint glimmer of light. That was excitement. Lu Feng knew that although his current state seemed dangerous, there was not much difficulty left. Finally, Lu Feng's footsteps arrived at the light circle. He finally entered it, as expected. He still succeeded, the Supreme Immortal Master sighed softly. His eyes were flickering with a complicated expression that was filled with shock and gratification. He knew that Lu Feng had succeeded. He had already expected that Lu Feng would succeed. However, at this moment, when success really appeared, he still had some unknown reasons. Even he himself did not understand why he was shocked. He actually succeeded in less than a day. This was really unbelievable. Many monstrous geniuses who were able to enter the 10th level and above had spent months. However, what about Lu Feng? He only used less than a day's time. In a day's time, even monstrous geniuses with outstanding talent could only enter the 3rd level. Moreover, that was only if they were monstrous geniuses with fast speed. However, Lu Feng had already completed all the trials. He actually entered the final domain in an instant. The entire world was in an uproar. Countless existences went crazy. They had really gone completely crazy. The 18th level. It's the 18th level. Someone actually entered the 18th level. The secret of the final origin is about to appear. It's really about to appear. What kind of existence is he? He's actually heaven-defying to such an extent. The 18th level of the Trial Pagoda. He actually managed to do it in a day's time. Shocking, shocking. Many existences did not know what to say about Lu Feng's performance. Moreover, they already knew that Lu Feng was definitely not one of the 5 ultimate kings. After all, the 5 ultimate kings had all failed. Only the Demon King and the Emperor had entered the final 17th level. Apart from the 5 of them, no one else had been able to enter the final level. No, that's not right. No, that's not all of them. This was because, according to the legends, there was a forbidden existence who had also reached such a crazy level. However, apart from the experts above the Immortal King level, no one else knew about his existence. Just now I seem to have heard the Eternal Immortal Master call him Lu Feng. Could it be? A moment ago these people did not think much of it. However, after seeing the heaven-defying Lu Feng, they seemed to have thought of something. They vaguely guessed. I know that taboo existence. His name is Liu Bei. And this Lu Feng also has the surname Liu. They both had the surname Liu, and they were both so heaven-defying. It was easy to make a connection between the two. Hearing these discussions, the Eternal Immortal Master seemed to have thought of something. He looked at the Sovereign Immortal Master, who smiled faintly and nodded slowly. Lu Feng is indeed the descendant of Liu Bei. He is his descendant. The Eternal Immortal Master fell silent. He could still vaguely remember the heaven-defying existence of the human king in the past. It was the appearance of the human king that made them understand what it meant to be invincible and terrifying beyond the ultimate kings. Liu Bei and Lu Feng. The Liu family is really that shocking. The Sovereign Immortal Master fell silent for a moment, then nodded gently. Indeed. According to Lu Feng, the human king Liu family is the most powerful family in the original universe. But come to think of it, it makes sense. After all, how could the bloodline of such a great existence be weak? The 3 of them were all immortal masters, so they naturally knew about bloodline inheritances. Generally, they were the most terrifying existences among the first few generations of the original universe, and this human king's bloodline must be the same. So it was only natural that his bloodline could be so terrifying. After a moment of silence, the 3 immortal kings once again looked into the void. At the shining 18th level of the Tower of Trials, after retreating from the ball of light, Lu Feng sat quietly where he was. His expression was slightly trembling. He took a deep breath and tried hard to calm his emotions. Lu Feng understood that he was right. There was indeed an origin stored here. It was the existence of the Divine King's forbidden origin. And this origin was the origin of Martial Path Incarnation. Martial Path Incarnation, Martial Path Incarnation. Now I have opened the 5th level of Tongtian Fudu. In addition to what I obtained in the Land of Sealed Demons, as long as I obtain this Martial Path Incarnation, I can enter the mythical domain of Martial Path Incarnation. And my Martial Path Incarnation is Tongtian Fudu. Actually, Lu Feng had already sensed it. The martial path incarnation formed by Tongtian Futu did not have any power beside others. But to Lu Feng, who had the original body of Tongtian Futu, his martial path incarnation was truly invincible and terrifying. It was incomparable to anything else. Lu Feng could even confirm that his martial path incarnation was definitely the most terrifying martial path incarnation since ancient times. It was comparable to his own physical body. Physical body, plus my martial path incarnation, plus my forbidden domain, the existence of the three divine king mythical forbidden domains are the most terrifying and invincible existences in their respective domains. Once the three domains are used at the same time, then who can compare to my strength? I'm afraid. His eyes flickered with an extremely excited light. I'm afraid that after I condense the three invincible domains, my power will be able to reach that invincible level without condensing the fourth one. If it was just an ordinary existence who opened the three domains, then it would only be equivalent to an ordinary overlord of an era, equivalent to an existence of the 30th level of heaven. But he was different. His battle strength was in the forbidden mythical domain, which was an invincible blessing. This battle strength was in the forbidden mythical domain, which was equivalent to an existence of two mythical domains. And his physical body was in the forbidden mythical domain. Because of the formation of this invincible battle body, it was the same. In addition to the existence of such a heaven-defying martial way manifestation domain, it might not be impossible for Lu Feng to face an expert at the 33rd level of the ultimate heaven by relying on the three domains. Thinking of this, Lu Feng tried hard to calm his heart. An indescribable brilliance appeared in his eyes. After a long time, he finally looked at the ball of light beside him. Without hesitation, Lu Feng slowly stood up and walked over. The next moment, he stretched out his arm and directly merged with the ball of light. Chapter 939. During the process of fusion, there were no accidents at all. There wasn't even any pain. Lu Feng just closed his eyes slightly and felt an unparalleled power pouring in. After feeling the formation of a new kind of power surging, it was completed. It was completed so easily. Power, is this my power? Lu Feng floated quietly in the air. He could stay in this realm without any time limit. This was the godly king domain that belonged to the supreme beings of the universe. Lu Feng slowly closed his eyes. He was feeling the difference and the power he had now. After a while, Lu Feng smiled. He really smiled. Then, he slowly opened his eyes. Lu Feng's eyes were calm. Although he was smiling, his eyes were still calm. Sure enough, it's just as I thought. It's exactly the same. This martial path incarnation mythical domain is too powerful. It's really too powerful. It's not any worse than my physical body forbidden mythical domain. I can feel that the current me is really a kind of pinnacle. I really have the qualifications to contend with the Overlord of Time. Lu Feng had only entered the first layer of the Divine King's domain. He had only activated the martial path incarnation forbidden mythical domain. But now, he had the power to contend with the Overlord of Time. This proved that his martial path incarnation forbidden mythical domain was as invincible as the physical body forbidden mythical domain. How about this? After I've finished absorbing everything, I'll give it a try. It just so happens that he's also outside. It just so happened that the Sovereign Immortal Master was outside. The Sovereign Immortal Master was definitely an existence at the peak of the 32 heavens. He already belonged to the peak of the 32 heavens. If he fought with him, Lu Feng would be able to understand the extent of his strength. Thinking of this, Lu Feng really couldn't wait. The next moment, he looked at the other ball of light, the one that had an indescribable attraction to him. Lu Feng didn't hesitate and directly approached it. Then, he stretched out his arm and touched the ball of light. The call of the same origin filled Lu Feng's heart with an indescribable feeling of comfort. This was completely opposite to the test of will he experienced before. This comfortable feeling made Lu Feng moan uncontrollably. His soul seemed to have floated and entered an unimaginable realm. However, this situation didn't last long because the process of fusion was very, very fast. In just a few moments, the fusion was complete. Lu Feng stood quietly on the spot and opened his eyes. At this moment, the image of heavenly Futu appeared behind him. And the appearance of this strange phenomenon made Lu Feng feel an even more terrifying blessing. This is the power of heavenly Futu. Really, it's too powerful. If I can really summon its main body, then any existence in front of me will be like floating clouds, nothing at all. Heavenly Futu was a legendary 14th grade existence. It was an ultimate existence that surpassed the 13th grade Supreme Ruler realm. Once it was summoned, Lu Feng believed that there was nothing he couldn't suppress with its original body alone. This was how terrifying and abnormal it was. Lu Feng took a deep breath and calmed his emotions. Then, he looked around. 3 figures appeared beside him. When he saw them, Lu Feng smiled and nodded gently. "Did you succeed?" the Sovereign Immortal Master asked with a smile. In fact, when he saw the Tower of Eternity disappear, he knew that he had succeeded. Upon hearing this, Lu Feng nodded gently. Yes, I did. Although they had already guessed it, when they heard Lu Feng admit it, the Sovereign Immortal Master, the Eternal Immortal Master, and the guide couldn't help but have a terrifying glow in their eyes. They already knew why Lu Feng had entered this place. Now Lu Feng had succeeded. This meant that Lu Feng had become powerful once again. Furthermore, this time around, he had become much more powerful than he had been in the past. Back then, Lu Feng was equivalent to a full circle flowing time immortal venerable. Now that he had comprehended another forbidden domain, he had already become a full circle immortal venerable. After a moment of silence, the Sovereign Immortal Master spoke again. Now, what is your current level of combat strength? The Sovereign Immortal Master understood that Lu Feng's strength couldn't be guessed based on the past. Just the existence of 2 forbidden domains made him comparable to a full circle flowing time immortal venerable. And once he comprehended another forbidden domain, then he definitely wouldn't be someone that a simple 30 heavens could compare to. At the very least, he would be an expert at the 31 levels of heaven. Lu Feng was silent, his eyes filled with a turbulent light. In the next moment, he looked at the Sovereign Immortal Master and finally said something that made everyone tremble. "Sovereign Immortal Master, can you and I have a battle? Can you and I have a battle?" In an instant, the world fell silent. It wasn't just the geniuses and monsters who were stunned when they heard this. Even the immortal kings were the same. They were all stunned. The Eternal Immortal Master stared blankly at Lu Feng. The guides stared blankly at Lu Feng. They were really doubting what they had just heard. "You and I have a battle? You want to fight me?" The Sovereign Immortal Master was silent for a moment. After a moment, he repeated his words and confirmed it again. Lu Feng chuckled and nodded. "Indeed, I already have an estimate of my combat strength in my heart, but whether it is really at that level or not, I need to fight to know. Right now, you're the only one who can make me fight." Lu Feng's words had undoubtedly shown his strength. The Sovereign Immortal Master smiled, an indescribable smile. "Lu Feng, I was right about you. Your strength is really indescribable. You are now at the 32 levels of heaven. You are at the same level as the Eternal Immortal Master, the Chaos Immortal Master, and me at the 32 levels of heaven. If that's the case, then let's fight. But I want to say that I have been at this level for too long. I have reached the limit of this realm. Furthermore, my understanding of this realm is not something you can imagine." In the eyes of the Sovereign Immortal Master, Lu Feng had just reached this realm. He didn't have a deep understanding of this realm, and his combat strength was definitely limited. It was just that he didn't expect that he couldn't compare to Lu Feng. The battle between the two had attracted the attention of countless existences. Countless people looked at Lu Feng. They really couldn't figure out where Lu Feng got the courage to challenge the sovereign immortal master. One had to know that the sovereign immortal master was one of the three greatest existences in the history of the second universe. He was one of the strongest peak existences. Although the five ultimate kings were more famous than him, it was a pity that the five ultimate kings had never entered the immortal king realm. Hence, they were only famous, but in terms of strength, they couldn't be compared to the three great immortal masters. In history, other than the invincible emperor and that mysterious taboo existence, the sovereign immortal master is the strongest. The sovereign immortal master is at the level of the top three in history. And now, among these existences, he can be called the number one immortal master, the number one expert. It's just that I don't know where this Lu Feng got the confidence to challenge such a great existence. Many existences were paying attention. As they moved, they began to fly. In the sacred ground, flying was completely forbidden. Hence, those geniuses and monsters could only stand helplessly on the spot, looking at the immortal kings and Lu Feng gradually disappearing. Of course, they also understood that it was best if they didn't go. The sovereign immortal master is the greatest immortal master, the number one expert in the world. And this, I think, Lu Feng also knows. But he still wants to challenge despite knowing this. This proves that he has absolute confidence. So, his combat strength has at least reached the level of an immortal master. A battle between two immortal masters. Even the slightest ripple would be enough to completely annihilate us. So, it's best if we don't go. In such a collision, even immortal kings might not be able to protect themselves. Naturally, they would be in even more danger. Although such a battle was shocking, it wasn't worth it to give up one's life for it. In the void, the immortal kings who left with them weren't all. Many of them were immortal kings who had just stepped into the immortal king realm. After hesitating for a long time, they finally chose to stay. Because to them, although such a battle was shocking, it was also full of danger. There was a real possibility that they might die. Giving up their lives for a battle was really not worth it. What a pity! Although this Lu Feng will definitely suffer in the end, or even suffer a crushing defeat. But to be able to challenge the sovereign immortal master, he must have the combat strength of an immortal master. As expected of the descendant of that great taboo. But in my opinion, he is much more terrifying than that taboo existence. A battle between two immortal masters couldn't be carried out in the sacred ground. Although the sacred ground was protected, the combat strength of an immortal master wasn't something that could be underestimated. If they were to fight, it would really be the end of an era. Heaven and earth would tremble. Even time and space would be annihilated. Therefore, for safety's sake, they left the eternal sacred ground for the boundless chaotic star domain. The chaotic star domain was a world of endless chaos. Although it was called the chaotic star domain, there wasn't much chaotic stagnant water within it. Many places were filled with an illusory world filled with the aura of chaos. They were all zones formed by the aura of chaos. These places were incomparably dangerous. Even golden immortals were at risk of dying there. However, the weakest of the existences that had come here were terrifying peak immortal kings. Among them, there were also many immortal venerables. There were even 4 immortal masters. Therefore, these dangers really weren't much. Chapter 940. Finally, the two of them slowly came to a stop. After sensing the situation here, the sovereign immortal master nodded his head lightly. Lu Feng, let's leave it at that. This boundless area is a world of chaos. Here, we can fight with all our might without worrying about hurting anything. Lu Feng nodded gently and looked at the sovereign immortal master. Then, let's do it here. Lu Feng also saw this place. He could sense that there were no living beings in the boundless space around him. Moreover, it was destined that there would be no living creatures in such a place. Therefore, this place was the most suitable place for a fight. At this moment, the two of them looked at each other and stood quietly in place. At this moment, countless existences knew that they were about to collide. Therefore, in an instant, those immortal kings and even immortal venerables left with great haste. They naturally understood that in such a fight, even the immortal venerables were in danger of dying at any time. Even the two immortal masters, the guide and the eternal immortal master, had left the area. Looking at the two of them silently staring at each other in the boundless space above the chaos, a strange emotion flashed across the eternal immortal master's eyes. Is this Lu Feng really that strong? He could sense that Lu Feng was not old. In fact, he could even say that he was very, very young. However, such a young existence already possessed the battle prowess of an immortal master. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Although Liu Bei was not very old when he came here, he was at least 100 years old. Compared to his son, Lu Feng, he is really too young. But compared to Lu Fenglai and Liu Bei, he is still lacking. Such a taboo existence is still lacking. How strong is this Lu Feng? The sovereign immortal master sighed deeply with an indescribable feeling. To achieve his current status and strength, he had spent countless hours, but what about Lu Feng? In just a few short years, he was already on par with him. This caused him to be filled with countless complicated emotions. This is the difference between us. Actually, we don't have to think about it. After all, Lu Feng was an existence that had been chosen. He was the foundation for resisting the future calamity. Thus, it was only natural for him to defy the heavens. Otherwise, how could he carry the banner of the era? The eternal immortal master was silent for a moment. After a while, he nodded. That's right. But to be able to challenge the sovereign immortal master after just breaking through, this is also a kind of courage. This time, let's see how heaven-defying this Lu Feng is. In the chaos, they looked at each other quietly. Both of them were incomparably silent. In the next moment, there was an upheaval. Forbidden light shone around the eternal immortal master. These were the three forbidden realms. Unlike Lu Feng, the eternal immortal master did not have a taboo mythological domain. After all, such a domain could only be activated when one was invincible. Obviously, he did not have that kind of capital. However, the sovereign immortal master's existence had remained at the immortal master realm for countless years. He had already polished the three forbidden realms to the extreme. It could be said that he now possessed an almost invincible power. Apart from being completely invincible in the 33 levels of ultimate heaven, he was already very terrifying. What a pity, what a pity! Without the taboo domain, he would never be able to enter the 33 levels of ultimate heaven. The sovereign immortal master is really sad. The sovereign immortal master was really sad. Although he had worked so hard, he still could not become such a great existence. The sovereign immortal master looked at Lu Feng and released the three forbidden realms. In an instant, he had already reached the level of the 32 levels of ultimate heaven. Now, he really regarded Lu Feng as his opponent. Previously, he had asked Lu Feng about his current level of strength. This was because he knew that after Lu Feng had comprehended the three forbidden realms, he was definitely not just a mere 30 levels of the epic immortal master. Just now, when Lu Feng said those words, he had already understood. Lu Feng was indeed not just 30 levels of ultimate heaven. In fact, he was not even at the lowest 31 levels of ultimate heaven as he had imagined. His true battle strength was already enough to challenge him. The sovereign immortal master knew that Lu Feng was definitely not a person who was blindly arrogant. His character made it impossible for him to be so stupid. After all, after going through two such painful trials, Lu Feng's will and heart were definitely incomparably resolute and unyielding. Lu Feng wanted to challenge him. This proved that Lu Feng definitely had the strength to do so. Therefore, he did not hold back at all from the start and directly used his strongest power. Looking at Lu Feng, the sovereign immortal master's eyes glinted coldly. He was waiting for Lu Feng to display his strength and clash with him. Looking straight at the sovereign immortal master, Lu Feng pondered for a moment before finally starting to support himself. This was the first time that Lu Feng had used all three forbidden realms at the same time. Even when he was on the 18th level of the Tower of Eternity, he didn't have such support after obtaining the martial Dao incarnation. Now, this was the first time that Lu Feng was about to enter the stage of great success. Without any hesitation, Lu Feng finally unleashed his forbidden realms. The forbidden realm of battle power had appeared. In an instant, the protection of Lu Feng's power caused the chaotic void to tumble and tremble unceasingly. It caused the heavens and earth to roar unceasingly and be annihilated unceasingly. This is the pinnacle of power. It can even be said that this is the power of a half-step immortal venerable. It's really powerful, extremely powerful. This was only the first layer of support. Next would be the second layer of support. In another instant, Lu Feng's body blossomed with indescribable brilliance. This was a kind of physical aura that fused billions of destruction, the destruction of the world and the truth of the heavens and earth. The origin of the physical body had appeared. It had really appeared. What a powerful power! At this moment, Lu Feng is definitely a great perfection immortal venerable. He's the most powerful immortal venerable existence. He's much stronger than the number one expert of any continent. I'm afraid that no one below the immortal master realm is his match. With just the support of two forbidden realms, he already possesses such a powerful power. This Lu Feng is really strong. Many existences in the distant void were silent. They knew that the current Lu Feng was almost invincible in this era. Among the others, no one was a match for Lu Feng. Not only that, they didn't even have the slightest bit of courage when they saw Lu Feng. However, if this was all, it wasn't enough. It was far from enough. It was far from enough. Because the current Lu Feng was only invincible among those below the immortal master realm. He was still too far away from having the strength to contend with the sovereign immortal master. However, these people also understood that Lu Feng wasn't that simple. Especially the eternal immortal master and the guide. They knew that Lu Feng had undergone another transformation this time. He had obtained a third taboo origin, but now, he had only obtained two taboo origins. He was still a long way from reaching the great perfection realm. Therefore, the two immortal masters were waiting. They were waiting for Lu Feng to complete his shocking transformation. Looking at the sovereign immortal master in the distance, Lu Feng smiled faintly. Then, he finally began his transformation. It was the final transformation that would cause countless living beings to tremble in fear. In an instant, the most powerful blessing had appeared and entered Lu Feng's body. Behind him, an ancient vision appeared vaguely. It was an indescribable mystery, a terrifying and unknown vision. That was Futu. That's Futu. It's Futu. There were many immortal venerables who recognized Fu Tuesday. They recognized him at a glance. The two immortal masters were even more so. They didn't expect Lu Feng's immortal demon incarnation to be Futu. If one were to talk about the most terrifying artifact in history, then it would be the existence of the Buddha. One must know that this was a terrifying 14th grade artifact that even history couldn't remember. Lu Feng stood quietly between heaven and earth, receiving the support of the sky-piercing pagoda's martial path embodiment. At this moment, he was already so powerful that he couldn't be defeated. That aura, that power, made the entire era tremble. The entire endless chaotic world began to collapse. In his eyes there was an indescribable brilliance. It was a brilliance that had reached the extreme of shock and madness. At this moment, the supreme immortal master was trembling from head to toe, trembling endlessly. Such power, such power! This is the limit that I once pursued, the limit that I dreamed of. This aura belonged to the edge of transformation. Just a little bit more and he would be able to transform and enter the realm of invincibility. Finally, Lu Feng's aura came to a stop as it underwent a transformation. He stood quietly in the endless void, his eyes slightly closed. Lu Feng stopped at the last moment. He stood quietly in the void, feeling the changes in himself. He could feel the metamorphosis of himself. Lu Feng's lips curved into a perfect arc. He knew that he had really done it. He had really entered such a great realm. His power had really reached the limit. It was crazy. If the current me can really push these two forbidden domains to the limit, then I will really become an expert at the ultimate heaven of the 33 layers. Experts at the ultimate heaven of the 33 layers were considered the top existences in the primordial immortal demon era. They were below the unparalleled ruler and were almost at the peak of the realm. And the current Lu Feng, through battle, could enter such a realm even if he didn't push everything to the limit. If I can obtain the fourth forbidden origin, then I will truly become pseudo-ruler, pseudo-ruler, pseudo-ruler. This was a truly invincible existence. Looking across the endless starry sky, even if the existences of the primordial immortal demon era were included, apart from him, there were only the 8 unparalleled rulers in the primordial immortal demon era. In the future, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were considered rulers, and so was the Shakyamuni Buddha. The human king was the only ruler. It could be said that apart from these existences, in the endless eras, in the eternal space-time, Lu Feng was basically the most invincible existence. If he pushed everything to the limit and obtained the fourth forbidden origin, he, Lu Feng, would truly be invincible. He would truly become an absolute quasi-supreme, a great existence that countless living beings would look up to for eternity. At that time, I will truly be at the quasi-greater mastery realm. Only then will I be qualified to return to the primordial universe, and be qualified to protect my loved ones before the great calamity. His heart was in an indescribable turmoil. His eyes were filled with a supreme aura that shook the soul. The current him had truly gone mad. Looking at the sovereign immortal master in the distance, who had recovered from his shock, Lu Feng's voice roared through the void. Sovereign immortal master, come help me. Help me shatter the final domain, so that I can still become a true expert at the ultimate heaven of the 33 layers in this state. Chapter 941. Looking at each other, their eyes were filled with a kind of crazy will. Lu Feng, at his peak, could enter that kind of dominating domain. However, he didn't dare to use that kind of limit casually. Because if he didn't use that kind of power well, even a universe calamity might evolve. And if that was the case, it would be dangerous, really dangerous. Hence, Lu Feng wanted to try to use the most powerful power in such a state, to become a great being of the 33rd level of the ultimate heaven. This was his true intention. Lu Feng, although you are already half a step into the ultimate heaven, but you are still an existence who is only a few decades old. There is still a big gap between you and me. This time, I'll let you see the truth. Turbulence, sovereign immortal master was truly turbulent. In the void, he summoned billions of powers to descend. With a wave of his hand, an unparalleled crack appeared between heaven and earth. In the world of primal chaos, the void was incomparably stable. It was almost impossible to tear it apart. This was also why once one was swept into the primal chaos, they would never be able to escape. But at this moment, when he used such a great power, The primal chaos void wasn't just torn apart, it was completely torn apart. This was an indescribably terrifying scene. A crack could devour endless, eternally. In the primal universe, such a crack could easily devour hundreds of super-life galaxies. This was the invincible power of a great being of the 32nd level of the ultimate heaven. This was the shocking battle power of a great being of the 32nd level of the ultimate heaven. His power was far beyond anything that could be imagined or compared to. In a hazy state, Lu Feng experienced the baptism of the endless primal chaos annihilation. But he didn't change at all. Since ancient times, the most terrifying battle body. Even if he didn't use it to its peak, it still wasn't something that could be hurt by any hardship. Just like this, just as the annihilation of the primal chaos was about to arrive, Lu Feng gently waved his arm. It was this wave of his arm that produced a power that could collapse the universe. The primal chaos was torn apart, and the endless starry sky turned into nothingness. The first exchange between the two of them ended just like that. In the distance, those beings who were watching were all silent and trembling. In the collision just now, the power that the two of them used was definitely the power of the 32 heavens. When such a powerful power appeared, not to mention some immortal kings, even great perfection immortal venerables would be severely injured or even completely annihilated. This was invincibility. This was power. Many immortal kings heaved a heavy sigh of relief. They finally turned and departed. These immortal kings had already understood. Lu Feng wasn't arrogant and ignorant. He didn't know what to do and went to challenge them. He really did have such an ability. And with such strength, how terrifying would the annihilation caused by the clash between him and the sovereign immortal master, the #1 expert in the world? It could be seen from the casual collision just now that a casual collision between them had the possibility of seriously injuring a perfected old-time celestial venerable. Then, wouldn't they, who were only celestial kings, directly turn into ashes? They weren't idiots. There were some battles that they could watch, but there were some battles that they weren't qualified to watch. At the very least, this collision that represented the pinnacle of this era was far from something that immortal kings like them could casually watch. Not only that, but many old-time celestial venerables had also begun to leave. They didn't want to lose their lives because of such a battle. The eternal immortal master and the guide stood quietly where they were. There was an indescribable look in each other's eyes. The guide looked at the eternal immortal master and was silent for a long time. Finally, he sighed slowly. Now you know how powerful he is. Just now, the eternal immortal master had asked if Lu Feng was really that powerful. And now, Lu Feng had proven himself. He had proven his strength. Was he really that powerful? Was he really able to carry the banner of this era? Was he really able to lead the countless living beings through eternal suffering and into a brand new era? This was Lu Feng. This was the great new Emperor Lu Feng. Indeed, he is really, really, really powerful, the eternal immortal master stammered, but he still managed to say what was on his mind. Previously, he had thought that Lu Feng was at the same level as him, and belonged to the 31st level of heaven. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated Lu Feng. Lu Feng's power was not at the 31st level of heaven. He was only half a step away from that level of power. If he wins this battle, then Lu Feng will become the great being of the 31st level of heaven. If he enters the Chaos Sacred Land and obtains the final origin, then no one will be able to compare to him in terms of strength. At that time, he may not be able to enter the ranks of the eternal invincible sovereigns. But he will definitely be a half-step sovereign. He will be at the pinnacle of the 31st level of heaven. He will be invincible below the sovereigns. He will be able to fight against the sovereigns after their ascension. Lu Feng was in a frenzy. He was using all his strength. In his mind, the power of the immortal venerables, immortal masters, and limitless heaven experts that he had seen in the past kept appearing. In the beginning, Lu Feng was obviously at a disadvantage. But as he continued to fight, he became more and more skilled and more powerful. Vaguely, Lu Feng seemed to have entered a state where he could refine all techniques and return to the origin. The sovereign immortal master could no longer calm himself down. His existence at this moment was really crazy. In his mind, Lu Feng's existence was nothing. It was really nothing. After all, Lu Feng was just a young man who was not even 100 years old. How could he compare to him, who had been stuck in the sovereign immortal master realm for millions of years? But Lu Feng's performance had really shattered all his delusions. He realized that there really was such a terrifying existence. There really was such an extreme existence. In the beginning, Lu Feng had only launched countless attacks in a hazy state. Moreover, these attacks were very unskillful and full of traces of various traces. Could be said that these were not created by Lu Feng. It was just that the eternal immortal master did not understand how Lu Feng could know so many shocking attacks. How was it possible for him to unleash so many shocking attacks? This did not make sense. It was just a theory. But now, Lu Feng was just that terrifying. Of course, this was still not so bad. After all, those invincible moves were not something that Lu Feng had practiced for a long time. He could use them, but he could not fully display the strongest power. But in the process of the battle, the sovereign immortal master discovered something that he could not believe. It was something that shocked him, and that was that Lu Feng was refining continuously. He was refining those moves continuously. The next time he used them, they would be infused with an indescribable essence, and they would be filled with an indescribable will. Countless profound mysteries were being forcibly refined by him. Countless amounts of power were being forcibly extracted by him, and all of it was being channeled into his own rhythm. This was the kind of terror that shocked him and made the sovereign immortal master feel unfathomable. Finally, with the appearance of a ruthless blow, the sovereign immortal master was sent flying for the first time in the battle. His crippled body smashed through the primal chaos, causing a bleak and withered color to appear in the boundless primal chaos world. Bleak, it was really bleak. Just one blow had caused the sovereign immortal master to suffer an unimaginable injury. This was Lu Feng's power at the moment. This was the power that he had refined countless times. Crawling up from the void with great difficulty, the supreme immortal master looked towards Lu Feng's direction and took in a deep breath. His expression was shaken. Refining billions of divine powers and cultivation techniques into one's own strength. Lu Feng, you are now only one step away from the great success realm of the invincible realm. What kind of cultivation technique is this? What kind of shocking cultivation technique is this? Lu Feng looked at the sovereign immortal master in the distance and smiled gently. His eyes shone with an unprecedented brilliance. At this moment, Lu Feng's voice finally rang out. The name of my cultivation technique is Supremacy, Supremacy. Cultivation technique, Supremacy. What kind of domineering name was this? After a moment, the eternal immortal master seemed to have understood something and nodded gently. Supremacy, Supremacy. It is indeed so. In your heart, your future is destined to be the greatest existence in the endless time and space. You are destined to be the one and only eternal existence between heaven and earth. Lu Feng smiled gently. The current him was really close to reaching the great success realm. In the blink of an eye, there were still a few people who could be his match. After using the ultimate immortal technique, 1 billion mortal world, 1 billion immortals, there was no one in the vast universe who could compete with him. He, Lu Feng, was going to be the sole supremacy. In this life, I am going to be the sole supremacy of the galaxy. Supremacy, everything in the world, supremacy, everything in the universe, supremacy, supremacy in all the realms, supremacy, invincible throughout history. The 4 words, supremacy, encompassed everything, encompassing Lu Feng's heart, the ultimate domineering spirit. The sovereign immortal master laughed maniacally. Since ancient times, the greatest aptitude, the most terrifying will, the most powerful opportunity, the most firm belief. If you, Lu Feng, can't succeed, what else can't succeed? Lu Feng, as you wish, I'll help you one last time. You'll be able to use my existence to complete your shocking transformation. The sovereign immortal master was also going crazy. He knew that Lu Feng's rise was no longer something that could be stopped by anyone. It was not something that could be limited. His strength was already preordained by the times. As for Lu Feng's strength, it would only bring him more benefits. Therefore, he was willing to do everything he could to help Lu Feng complete this final help, to help him enter the true ultimate domain. In the blink of an eye, the sovereign immortal master had actually mobilized countless powers. Unknowingly, Lu Feng seemed to see the appearance of a spacetime and space. He saw that in the distant spacetime, there was a turbulent aura that shook heaven and earth. In an instant, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with incomparable complexity. That is the supreme holy ground that was connected by the unknowns. There was an endless amount of power that was constantly supporting the sovereign immortal master's strength. It originated from the supreme holy ground. As a supreme being, the supreme immortal master could always rely on the invincible power of the supreme holy ground. After being supported by the domineering supreme holy ground, the sovereign immortal master's strength was constantly increasing, and without any change. Although he was unable to enter the battle strength of the ultimate domain, this did not mean that he did not have the power of the ultimate domain. When all the power was released, he finally broke through all the shackles and entered that great level. Countless powers were gathered by him, starting to gather and tremble. Then, under the witness of the remaining immortal masters and the 2 immortal masters, it was born eternal destruction. Such power was completely about to conquer the eternal era and destroy all existences. Lu Feng also went berserk. He smelted all the powers and entered his own cultivation technique, soul supremacy. He was almost at the realm of great success. The current him was not clear about the terrifying extent of his battle strength. Even he did not understand it, because he also did not know how unsolvable his limits were. However, Lu Feng understood one thing. That was, nothing in front of him could stop him. It was impossible to make him retreat. Galaxy, soul supremacy. After smelting billions of powers and turning them into eternity, Lu Feng finally condensed the strongest killing technique belonging to the supreme holy ground, soul supremacy of the galaxy. Soul supremacy of the galaxy, soul supremacy of the galaxy. This was Lu Feng's belief. This was Lu Feng's belief. This was Lu Feng's peerless madness. It was a collision. It was really a collision. What primal chaos! What void! What era! Shattered, all disappeared. All of them were illusory existences. This was invincibility. This was the truth. Between heaven and earth, only power is the eternal law. The strongest power overlooks everything. Nothing can resist it. Nothing can resist it. This is the ultimate collision of power. Chapter 942. Power. That was endless power. Only endless power was truly eternal. It was the foundation of becoming the greatest expert and suppressing the heavens and earth. Obviously, Lu Feng firmly believed in this, which was why he had never believed in heaven and earth or the legion of gods. The only person he trusted was himself, Emperor Lu Feng. Therefore, his true goal, his true hope, and his only thought was to reign supreme over the galaxy. He wanted to rely on his own power to become the greatest existence in the endless eternity. In my era, I am the greatest existence. This was Lu Feng. The terrifying appearance of the reign supreme over the galaxy almost annihilated everything. The chaos was torn apart, and the aura of life was annihilated. The two immortal masters began to retreat rapidly. Their hearts were filled with shock. They could no longer believe that such a level of power was possible. This is definitely the fighting strength of the 33rd level of the ultimate heaven. This is definitely the fighting strength of the 33rd level of the ultimate heaven. Lu Feng's realm of power had already entered the 33rd level of the ultimate heaven. The Paragon Holy Master had been in the 32nd level of the ultimate heaven for countless years. He was the absolute pinnacle of the 32nd level of the ultimate heaven. He was even slightly stronger than the eternal immortal master of the ancient End era. And now, although he was still unable to become a great being in the ultimate sky of the 33 layers, with the help of the supreme Holy Land and the continuous support and shrouding of the endless years, his strength was actually comparable to that of the true ultimate sky of the 33 layers. Therefore, the dazzling eternal strike that the Paragon Immortal Master had unleashed was the true fighting strength of the 33rd level of the ultimate heaven. Collision. Earlier, the immortal kings had already used everything they had to leave this place. Those who remained were all powerful immortal venerables. However, in the face of such an incomprehensible collision, they panicked and used many of their trump cards. They used everything they had to leave this place and fly into the distance. The eternal immortal Lord was silent for a moment as he looked at his guide. Then, he looked off into the distance, toward the terrifying collision that threatened to end an era. In the end, he decided to use his trump card. They really didn't want to leave because such an earth-shattering collision had never happened before since the birth of Universe 2. In an era, there had never been two powerhouses of the 32nd heaven born. Obviously, this meant that there would never be a confrontation between the 33rd heaven. Therefore, the current confrontation was the greatest collision since the birth of Universe 2 in the endless space and time. The illusory image of the eternal sacred land appeared and hovered quietly behind him. Endless power poured forth from the sacred land, causing the eternal immortal Lord's figure to grow hazy. After a brief moment of solidification, he took on the same color as the venerated immortal Lord. Eternity, protect, eternal guard was the sacred land's most powerful secret technique. Though it wasn't as powerful as the 33rd floor's ultimate sky, it was more than enough to ward off the shockwaves from the collision. After all, the two of them were only at the ultimate sky's power level, not quasi-sovereign power. Finally, when the defense was at its strongest, the shockwaves from the collision arrived. It continued to sway and shake, causing countless cracks to appear on the eternal protection of the entire 32 layers of heaven, and countless cracks to appear on it. Both the eternal immortal Lord and his guide took in a deep breath. Their eyes were filled with fear. One of them was a powerhouse of the 30th heaven, while the other was a powerhouse of the 31st heaven. If they'd come into contact with the power just now, they would have been annihilated in an instant. In the end, their deaths came to an end. Everything was destroyed and gone. Looking at the countless worlds below and the empty world where even the primal chaos had been annihilated, the two of them fell silent. After a long while, the eternal immortal Lord finally let out a long sigh. This level of destruction, it's really, he didn't know what to say. Because at this moment, he had no words to describe it. The scene in front of him was indescribable. Below them, the vast expanse of space, which could be described as infinite, had been completely emptied. Far away in the distance, boundless primal chaos energy began to recover slowly. Originally, once the chaos was destroyed, it could be restored in an instant. But this time, the destruction was too extreme. Even after such a long time, there was no sign of recovery. This was simply indescribable. This is the strength of these two people. Actually, I can already imagine how strong the sovereign immortal Lord is. After all, his level and power have already surpassed my ancestor, the eternal immortal Lord, and the chaos immortal Lord of that era. To be able to achieve this with the help of the Holy Land's power is also within my expectations. But for Lu Feng, I really didn't expect. It wasn't just the eternal immortal Lord. Even the guide hadn't expected or dared to imagine that Lu Feng actually possessed such strength. He had entered the ultimate sky of the 33rd heaven before he was even 100 years old. This was simply unexplainable. It was terrifying to the extreme. Sighing softly, with an indescribable feeling, the two finally looked into the distance, at the two great existences at the center of the destruction. The sovereign immortal Lord was in an incomparably miserable state. His entire body was covered with countless mottled scars. With the existence of a mythical taboo realm physical body, even if his body was broken, he would be able to recover in an instant, let alone be injured. But obviously, this time, he didn't do so. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. He thought that he had already used up all of his strength in the fight. He really didn't have much strength left. On the other hand, Lu Feng, although a little disheveled, his aura was still as stable as ever. And in the two people's perception, Lu Feng now seemed to be even stronger and more extreme. They understood that Lu Feng had really broken through. He had really become an existence at the 33rd level of the ultimate heaven. Letting out a deep breath, the two people smiled gently. Then, Lu Feng took a step forward and came to the side of the sovereign immortal Lord. Countless life aura began to enter the sovereign immortal Lord's body continuously. At this moment, a strange look appeared in the sovereign immortal Lord's eyes. The true essence of life origin? Lu Feng chuckled and nodded. This was the power of life. It was one of the two lowest supreme powers among the 6 supreme powers that Lu Feng currently controlled. However, even though it was of a low level, it was still an unparalleled power that belonged to the pinnacle of the king level. In this world, it was the ultimate unparalleled power. In other words, it was the true essence of the origin. Therefore, after seeing that Lu Feng actually controlled such a true essence of life origin, the sovereign immortal Lord couldn't help but gasp in surprise. Seeing that Lu Feng admitted it, the sovereign immortal Lord sighed softly. Lu Feng, let me tell you, is that your limit? Lu Feng was silent, then slowly shook his head. No, I don't know how powerful my limit is either. Because once I use it, many terrifying problems will arise. Unless it is absolutely necessary, I will not use it. However, I can vaguely feel that even if I use all my power to the limit, I will only be infinitely close to the threshold of the quasi-sovereign realm. I will never be able to step into it. And if I obtain the 4th forbidden origin, then I will indeed be able to enter the realm of the quasi-sovereign. However, I will definitely not be able to break through the final shackles and become a true, supreme sovereign. Lu Feng also understood that before his main body truly entered the divine king realm, he would at most be able to reach the quasi-sovereign realm. If his main body also became the supreme divine king, then perhaps he would be able to enter that realm and become a true existence on par with the human king primogenitor, as well as the 8 supreme sovereigns of the primordial immortal devil era. The sovereign immortal Lord nodded lightly. With the help of Lu Feng's life force, he was almost fully recovered. There was a complicated look in his eyes. Looking at Lu Feng, the sovereign immortal Lord nodded lightly and didn't say anything else. Beside him, the 2 immortal lords also came. At this moment, their gazes towards Lu Feng were filled with innumerable strange expressions. After all, everything in front of them shocked them so much that they couldn't believe it. Lu Feng, you are now the strongest expert in this world. Furthermore, your existence is even unique. Hearing this, Lu Feng smiled faintly and was about to say something. However, at this moment, a voice came from the void. Indeed, Emperor Lu Feng is already the strongest expert. However, he is not the only strongest expert. There are 4 or 5 people who can stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Looking in the direction of the voice, the 4 of them focused their gazes at the same time. In an instant, an equally mighty figure walked out of the endless chaos. His terrifying flicker could be clearly felt by many existences. Different colors appeared in their eyes. However, in the end, the colors in their eyes all converged into one. Lu Feng looked at him and asked after a moment of silence, "Are you the Chaos Immortal Lord?" The Chaos Immortal Lord was the master of one of the 3 great sacred lands. He was also one of the most terrifying experts in the world. Like the Eternal Immortal Lord, he was also the epic Immortal Venerable of the 31st Heaven. The Chaos Immortal Lord had finally appeared. Chapter 943. The Primal Chaos Immortal Master had finally appeared in front of everyone. This time, the 3 greatest existences in the second universe, the 3 Immortal Masters, were all here. Lu Feng looked at the Chaos Immortal Master, the Eternal Immortal Master, and the Sovereign Immortal Master. After a moment of silence, he smiled gently. He looked at the Chaos Immortal Master and said, "What did you say? Primal Chaos Immortal Master, did you mean that they are not going to stay here?" They all knew that the 5 people that the Primal Chaos Immortal Master spoke of were the 5 grand existences, the 5 ultimate kings. Lu Feng naturally knew that regardless of whether it was the Demon King who had once fought against him, the Immortal King whom he had met once, or even the Divine King whom he had met before, they were actually not in their peak states. In the end, they had never received the blessing of the luck. This was because the 5 ultimate kings knew that the blessings of luck had to be used at the last moment. Only then would they be able to break through the final shackle. However, based on the Immortal Master's words, it seemed that these people had already decided to break through and had chosen the blessings of an era. The Chaos Immortal Master looked at Lu Feng with an indescribably complicated expression. He knew a lot more about Lu Feng than anyone else, a lot more. This was because there was an ultimate king in his holy land. Although he did not have direct contact with Lu Feng, he knew Lu Feng very well. He knew Lu Feng very well. Of course, he did not know everything about Lu Feng. At least, he knew more than the other 2 Immortal Masters. They are not going to stay any longer. This is because they have sensed that the most suitable era is the era where all the secrets are intertwined. It is also the last and most dangerous era. They succeeded. A new era will begin, but they failed. Then, everything will turn into ashes. At this moment, the other 3 Immortal Masters were slightly taken aback. Complicated expressions appeared on their faces. They had sensed it before, and Lu Feng had also mentioned it. However, this was the first time they had heard someone say it so solemnly. Moreover, the person who had said it was an Immortal Master. Furthermore, the meaning behind his words seemed to be that the source of those words was one of the 5 most terrifying existences. In my holy land, in my primal chaos holy land, there is an ultimate king. He has been living in my primal chaos immortal realm for a very long time. He is the sacred king. The sacred king. Of the 5 ultimate kings, Lu Feng had already seen 3 of them. As for the emperor, he knew that he was quietly guarding a certain place in the foreign battlefield. The sacred king was the only one he had no news about. Now that he knew that the sacred ruler was actually in the primal chaos sacred land, Lu Feng's interest was piqued. Is the holy king there? The primal chaos holy lord was silent for a moment before he nodded gently. He was there before, but he has left now. He said that he wanted to enter a new level. In order to fight you and the unknown calamity, he has decided not to hold back anymore. Before he left, he told me that you would definitely go to the primal chaos holy land in the future. When I see you one day, he wants me to tell you. The Chaos Immortal Master's eyes were filled with an indescribable emotion. As for the other Immortal Masters, they were also paying close attention and listening attentively. The Chaos Immortal Master's voice rang out slowly. The Sacred King wants me to tell you that you don't have to rush to find them now. In the future, in the primal universe, when you break the last shackle, they will appear. That will be the time for the real battle, the time for the final battle. He said that you don't have to deliberately look for them. Although you are stronger than them, your accumulation is incomparable to theirs. Therefore, unless they appear on their own, unless you enter the Supreme Ruler realm, it will be impossible to find them. Lu Feng was silent for a while. Then he nodded gently. Indeed, although he was confident that he was stronger than the 5 great ultimate kings in many aspects, in terms of means, he was still inferior to these terrifying monstrous geniuses who had existed since the ancient eras. Therefore, what they said was true. Since they said so, I can only wait for them. I hope that they won't disappoint me when the time comes. After all, although they have transformed, I am no longer who I used to be. The current me and the me who had just entered the Taboo King realm are worlds apart. Really, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. The current Lu Feng was more than 10 times stronger than he had been at the same level in the past. At that time, he was already able to suppress the Devil King's avatar despite being 1 level lower. And now, in an even more inconceivable situation, he, Lu Feng, no longer feared anything. I hope that all of you won't disappoint me. Back then, before entering the ultimate domain, he had to carry out the final battle of the King realm in advance. This was Lu Feng's helplessness and also his regret. However, he wasn't very regretful because Lu Feng knew that his opponents weren't the imperial princes and the other supreme rulers. They weren't heaven-defying enough to be his opponents. His real opponents, the existences that Emperor Lu Feng wanted to fight in the final moments, were actually only 5 people. They were the 5 ultimate kings. After hearing Lu Feng's words, they fell silent. They knew very well that this wasn't Lu Feng's arrogance, because Lu Feng really had the qualifications to be arrogant. Lu Feng looked at the Chaos Immortal Master. After a moment of silence, he spoke. Previously, the Supreme Immortal Master has already told all of you, right? I hope to be able to enter the Primal Chaos Sacred Land. I wonder if it's possible. After the battle just now, Lu Feng really felt that he had entered the limits of the Great Perfection Realm. Such a speed of improvement really confirmed the words of the Great Phantom. In this place he could really improve rapidly. Lu Feng believed that as long as he entered the Primal Chaos Sacred Land, entered the Primal Chaos Pagoda and experienced the trials, he would definitely be able to break through and enter the 6th level of the Great Devil True Body and the Primal Scripture. At that time, he would really be at the Great Perfection Realm. Thinking of this, Lu Feng's heart couldn't help but tremble. He looked at the Chaos Immortal Master and waited for his answer. Looking at Lu Feng, the Chaos Immortal Master smiled faintly. Now, is there any use in saying that it's impossible? I'm not the Supreme Immortal Master, who has the highest power in the 32 heavens. He can summon the power of the Primal Chaos Sacred Land to fight against you temporarily, but I can't. There's no other way. Moreover, even if I'm the same as the Supreme Immortal Master, I still can't do it. Don't you see how he looks now? After saying this, the Primal Chaos Immortal Master deliberately glanced at the dispirited Paragon Immortal Master. His words were very clear. Even if he didn't agree, what could he do? The current Lu Feng was no longer the Lu Feng of the past. Now that he had absolute strength, he would be able to suppress anyone in the face of him with the most domineering strength. Even if the Chaos Immortal Master didn't agree, there was no other way he could stop Lu Feng. As long as Lu Feng wanted to, he could enter the Primal Chaos Sacred Land and the Primal Chaos Pagoda at any time. Hearing this, Lu Feng smiled faintly but didn't say anything else. He was determined to get the Primal Chaos Pagoda. After all, once he entered it, he would be able to break through and become a half-step sovereign. Then, he would be able to gather all the origin source of Tongtian Futu and become a complete Tongtian Futu. Therefore, if the Chaos Immortal Master didn't agree, Lu Feng would fight his way in regardless of the consequences. If he really couldn't do it, he wouldn't hesitate to use the ultimate immortal technique, 1 billion mortal world, 1 billion immortals. Everyone saw Lu Feng's expression clearly and knew that the Chaos Immortal Master was right. But now, no one was saying anything, because now that things had come to this, it was no longer something they could control at will. Alright, Lu Feng, let's go to the Primal Chaos Sacred Land now. It's time for the 18-level Primal Chaos Pagoda, which has been sealed for countless years, to appear in this world. Lu Feng chuckled and nodded. He looked at the Eternal Sacred Master, Paragon Sacred Master, and the guide beside him and nodded. Then, let's go. The few of them nodded gently. Then, they got up and waved their arms. They tore apart the endless void and disappeared from where they were. The existence of the primal chaos void was incomparably sturdy. Even a golden immortal couldn't guarantee his life here. Even an immortal king expert would find it difficult to tear open the void. However, the 5 people who left were all immortal masters. It was extremely easy for them to tear open the void. Soon, many figures appeared at the place where they disappeared. They were all immortal venerables. Previously, in order to avoid the aftermath of the collision, they had fled frantically. Now that the battle had finally ended, they returned to this place to see the outcome. Unfortunately, when they arrived, they didn't see any immortal venerables. They looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. We're all immortal venerables. We're the greatest existences among all the living beings in the world. But now, we don't even have the right to watch the collision between the two of them. We can only choose to flee. Sorrow, sorrow, this is our greatest sorrow. This was the sorrow of immortal venerables. Chapter 944. Within the primal chaos sacred land, countless existences stood quietly with indescribable expressions on their faces. They were filled with complicated emotions, shock, and confusion. In the final moment, the collision between Lu Feng and the sovereign immortal master with the power of the ultimate heaven of the 33 levels had caused the world to collapse. Everyone in the primal chaos sacred land could feel it. This kind of annihilation was so terrifying that they couldn't ignore it. They could only feel it. They had all seen the departure of the primal chaos immortal master. They were all waiting for the return of the primal chaos immortal master so that he could explain the real reason. After all, such a shocking annihilation had occurred so suddenly that anyone would be terrified. Seeing the return of the primal chaos immortal master, these people relaxed slightly. However, when they saw the 4 people following quietly beside the primal chaos immortal master, a strange expression appeared on their faces. In the next moment, a few ancient immortal venerables seemed to have recognized something. Their faces stiffened slightly, and without hesitation, they came before the 4 people and bowed respectfully. Greetings to the sovereign immortal master, eternal immortal master. Hearing his greeting, everyone was stunned, and then their faces changed drastically. The eternal immortal master was a little easier to deal with. After all, this was no longer the final ancient era, the most terrifying era of the eternal immortal master. Therefore, they really didn't care about the eternal immortal master. Although he was in the same realm as the primal chaos immortal master, this was the primal chaos sacred land. Would the primal chaos immortal master be afraid of the eternal immortal master here? However, when the opponent was the sovereign immortal master, they really didn't dare to be so sure. After all, the sovereign immortal master was the strongest expert in the world. He was the strongest immortal master in the world. In fact, given the time he had spent cultivating in the 32 levels of the ultimate heaven, He could be considered the strongest immortal master in the history of time and space. Even in the primal chaos sacred land, many disciples of the primal chaos sacred land weren't sure if the primal chaos sacred lord could defeat such an existence. Of course, the relationship between the three sacred lands had always been very harmonious. Although there was competition, it was definitely a healthy competition. There had never been any confrontations between the three sacred lands. However, things were different now. That was because the ripples of annihilation earlier were simply too frightening. They had no choice but to be cautious. On top of that, two great holy masters had come to visit together. This caused them to be slightly flustered. Seeing the attitude of these people, Sovereign Immortal Master and Eternal Immortal Master naturally thought of something. They smiled and nodded gently, not saying anything else. He turned around and looked at Lu Feng. This was the sacred land of chaos, not their sovereign sacred land or eternal sacred land. Therefore, they had no right to arrange anything. Therefore, they could only wait for the Chaos Immortal Master's arrangements. Sensing their gazes, the Chaos Immortal Master finally looked at Lu Feng. After a moment of silence, he said, "Lu Feng, we can begin at any time. What do you plan to do?" Lu Feng was silent for a moment before he gently nodded his head. "Let's begin. My state has always been the most perfect state. Right now I'm at my peak. So, we can start now." Upon hearing Lu Feng's words, the Chaos Immortal Master nodded his head gently. At this moment, an unprecedented light shone in his eyes. He looked at Eternal Immortal Master and Sovereign Immortal Master beside him. The three of them looked at each other in unison. Their gazes were filled with boundless radiance. It was a kind of excitement, a kind of anticipation, a kind of madness. Finally, after looking at each other, the three of them nodded their heads heavily. In the next moment, they waved their arms at the same time. Just like that, a resplendent brilliance appeared in the void. The brilliance didn't form any kind of domineering power. Instead, it seemed to carry some kind of strange trace. It was a kind of origin imprint. Lu Feng frowned slightly. He didn't understand what the three of them were doing. However, Lu Feng also knew that at this moment, they must have decided on something. This was because Lu Feng had already seen their resolute will when they looked at each other earlier. More and more brilliance appeared, finally forming something like a light screen. It was an enormous light screen on three sides. All three sides were incomparably huge and seemed to occupy the entire sky. Moreover, these three light screens weren't simple. They didn't just contain a single image. They seemed to be connected to innumerable places, and Lu Feng could see innumerable things up there. The three immortal masters looked at each other and nodded their heads resolutely. In the next moment, they closed their eyes. This process didn't last for long. In the blink of an eye, countless existences appeared within the light. At this moment, the three immortal masters opened their eyes as well. Their voices resounded at the same time, in such a coordinated manner. "I am the Immortal Master, the Supreme Immortal Master, the Supreme Immortal Master. I am the Eternal Immortal Master, the Pinnacle of Time, the Supreme Immortal Master. I am the Primordial Immortal Master, the Chaos Immortal Master, together with us." His voice became louder, and even more turbulent. Their eyes were filled with an indomitable aura, filled with an inexhaustible and crazed belief. They seemed to be carrying out some grand awakening ceremony. "In the name of the immortal masters of the sacred lands, we summon together. In the past, the heroic spirits who have been dormant for eternity. I summon you, return, return, return," their voices rang out. In an instant, countless existences fell into a state of confusion. Their expressions were sluggish, filled with doubt and shock. In fact, many of them were at a loss. The surface of the mirror of light cracked. Then, they turned into millions of rays of light that danced in the air and flew off into the distance. Then, they disappeared. Lu Feng's expression was indescribable. When those rays of light danced in the air, he felt the sacred lands of primal chaos crumble beneath his feet. It wasn't crumbling because its physical form was still there. Instead, it crumbled because the origin of the sacred lands of primal chaos was shattered. When the rays of light that belonged to the Chaos Immortal Master flew away, they split into countless parts and left together with the rays of light. In an instant, Lu Feng saw it. He saw the same thing happening to the other sovereign sacred lands and eternal sacred land. They too began to crumble, giving birth to countless strands of energy. They danced in the air, searching for the owner of the source of energy. In an instant, Lu Feng heard something. He heard a roar, the roar of countless creatures. This was a roar of awakening, a roar of revival of the soul. Their memories were constantly recovering, and their strength was in the greatest recovery. They were about to return, bringing with them the ultimate destiny that they had yet to complete in the past. This was the tremor of an era, the tremor of eternity. This was their heaven-defying roar of war. They had returned. The heaven-defying heroic spirits, the invincible souls of war, were finally returning. Lu Feng could feel his blood boiling. He could feel the call of fate. He could feel the hope of eternity. Lu Feng seemed to have thought of something. His expression was filled with indescribable turmoil. He really thought of something. He thought of what that great existence had said to him in the past. Lu Feng clearly remembered that he had said that this place was the last remnant of the primitive, immortal devil era. It was the last hope of the primitive, immortal devil era. If he didn't know anything, then in Lu Feng's opinion, this lineup was really powerful. There were at least 4 immortal lords. One had to know that they were the overlords of an era. The total number of immortal kings was definitely more than 100,000, or even 100,000, or even 1,000,000. Even the number of immortal venerables of the epoch wasn't less than a few thousand. This was really terrifying. If Lu Feng and the progenitor of the human king could be included, then it would be really powerful. However, when he saw the memories in Fudu, Lu Feng realized how ridiculous and ignorant it was. What kind of strength was this? Compared to the primitive immortal devil era, what kind of strength was this? At the peak of the epoch, the number of overlords that had entered the final door was more than the number of immortal kings now. And there were 8 supreme sovereigns back then. 8 supreme sovereigns. At the very last moment, there were more than 50 people who could reach the level of a quasi-supreme. Compared to now, the primitive immortal devil era was more than 1,000,000,000,000 times stronger. However, those great races had all disappeared. Then, with just the current lineup, can they succeed? Could it? No, absolutely not. However, that mysterious great existence, the great existence who was suspected to be the human emperor, still accurately said that this was the last hope of the primordial immortal devil age. It was the final place left behind. Then, this place must contain the real foundation. Now, when those countless origins disappeared, fluttered, and left, Lu Feng vaguely understood and felt it. It turned out that those heaven-defying heroic spirits were their final trump card. In fact, the ultimate purpose of the existence of the 3 Holy Lands was to ensure their survival. The 3 immortal masters looked at Lu Feng. There was a strange look in their eyes. Lu Feng, you should have seen it. Those heaven-defying heroic spirits are the foundation of the Holy Lands. The true purpose of the Holy Lands is to protect these heaven-defying heroic spirits. The teachings passed down by the primogenitor have clearly stated this. When the final battle arrives, awaken them. Wait for them to return, wait for them to wake up. On the heaven-defying path, they will reunite. Under the Great He's lead, they will find their past greatness and peerlessness. They will rise to glory, brilliance, and sublimation in the final moment. They will prove to the endless time and space that their glory has never been extinguished. Lu Feng fell silent. Then, he nodded gently. His eyes were filled with shock and excitement. He knew that these heaven-defying heroic spirits were truly heaven-defying heroic spirit. They would appear in the final battle, and just like before, they would once again go on an expedition to prove that they had never died and that they were glorious existences. The 33 levels of heaven, the final land of immortals, contains the ultimate secret of the universe. Back then, the immortals' conquest failed. Back then, he also failed. But I, Lu Feng, will not fail. I, Lu Feng, am destined to surpass everything. Wait for the moment I step into the Supreme Ruler realm. That will be the moment when I, Lu Feng, will truly reverse the endless eras. The unparalleled Sovereign Lord was truly the greatest unparalleled Sovereign Lord. This was because he knew that he was also an unparalleled ruler. It was just that his combat power was too terrifying. That was why he had reached level 14. As for Lu Feng, he was equally confident in himself. This was because everything about him was the most powerful thing in the world. Lu Feng, let's begin. During this period of time, we will first rise to the highest level, then return to the original universe. We need to find the final land of immortals, the location of the 33 levels of heaven. And the return of the great heroic spirits will also take time. So, let's hurry up. When they return, we will complete all the transformations and reach the limit. Let's start the true final battle in advance. I don't believe that with the greatness of our era, the so-called disaster can really stop us. Chapter 945. At the final moment, the three sacred lords could feel the terror of the final ceremony. They already knew how terrifying and unparalleled the final existence, the final heroic spirit, was. They were filled with boundless confidence. Lu Feng smiled when he heard their words. His eyes were filled with a crazed conviction. When I was very young, I was just a piece of trash who wasn't even qualified to be an ant in your eyes. But I didn't give up. I chose to continue, to persevere, because I firmly believed that my existence wasn't something that could be restrained by anything. That's why I'm here today, in this great realm. In this life, I will be stronger than anyone else. I will become the final barrier. I will protect forever. My family, my friends, my lovers, I will do everything I can to protect them. That's why I'll never fail. I have never, ever, and will never, ever fail. Lu Feng moved and arrived in front of the gates of heaven and earth in the sacred land of chaos. His strength was far beyond what it had been in the past. Therefore, Lu Feng cracked the gates of heaven and earth in the blink of an eye, forming a black hole that was completely absorbed by Lu Feng. He was much more powerful than he'd been in the past. Moreover, Lu Feng now had a terrifying will and majesty because of the previous battle. The countless beings in the surroundings had long known that the heavens and earth were about to shake. Therefore, when they saw Lu Feng's actions, they didn't say anything. They didn't ask anything. They just watched quietly. The gates of heaven and earth had been destroyed in an instant, and the power crystal had been completely absorbed. Lu Feng stored the power crystal in his body and soul again. This power had fused with the other two crystallized powers, quietly existing in the depths of Lu Feng's soul and body. They would only appear when Lu Feng needed them to help him. Back in the eternal sacred land, Lu Feng had faced all sorts of angry words when he'd obtained the power crystal. But now, there was no such thing in the sacred land of chaos. It wasn't because they didn't care. It was because Lu Feng was too powerful. Seeing the attitude of the three immortal masters towards Lu Feng, many existences already understood that Lu Feng must be an extremely important, or even abnormally powerful existence. He'd obtained all of this with the approval of the Chaos Immortal Masters. Therefore, these people didn't dare to casually participate in anything. Many people's eyes flashed with envy when they saw Lu Feng completely absorb the power crystal. They could imagine that if they could obtain such a power crystal, their strength would enter an indescribable level. At that time, they were absolutely in an incomparably terrifying and powerful state. Unfortunately, this was only their imagination. They weren't qualified to obtain the power crystal. After controlling the power crystal in his body, Lu Feng's eyes shone with an indescribable brilliance. As the owner of the power crystal, he naturally knew how terrifying it was. No other crystal could compare to it. It could be said that the power contained in the power crystal was more terrifying than the power contained in 100 epic immortal sovereigns. With 3 power crystals, it was more than enough for him to break through to the Divine King's realm. Exhaling deeply, Lu Feng turned his gaze to the center of the sacred land of chaos, the sky-piercing pagoda that was full of mysteries. With a light step, Lu Feng finally arrived in front of the sky-piercing pagoda. Beside him, the 4 immortal masters stood quietly. At this moment, no one doubted Lu Feng's existence anymore. They knew that the final test wouldn't be difficult for Lu Feng. Looking at Lu Feng, the sovereign immortal master chuckled. The next time you come out of here, Lu Feng will no longer be the Lu Feng of the past. In the boundless spacetime, there are only a few who are qualified to clash with you. There's almost no one left. Lu Feng's expression was solemn. He smiled faintly when he heard this. However, in the blink of an eye, his expression turned solemn again. Perhaps. I'm not sure what level I'll reach in the future. However, this time, I'm sure that when I return, I, Lu Feng, will become the most terrifying quasi-dominator in history. No one below the dominator can contend with me. This was where Lu Feng's conviction lay. This was where Lu Feng's confidence lay. He had the most terrifying martial path incarnation in history and such a freakish physical body. How could he, Lu Feng, be weaker than anyone else? Therefore, when Lu Feng obtained the final origin source, he would enter a whole new level. Taking a deep breath, Lu Feng no longer hesitated. With a single step, he stepped into the tower. Countless existences gathered here and watched quietly. They understood that the existence that could shatter the gate of heaven and earth was definitely a peerless and terrifying monster. Now that he was challenging the trial tower, there would definitely be a shocking phenomenon that would appear. Sure enough, in just an instant, Lu Feng had already passed through the 5th level and entered the 6th level directly. Apart from the Sovereign Immortal Master's guide and the Eternal Immortal Master, everyone else was incomparably shocked by his speed. Even the Chaos Immortal Master was the same. He really didn't expect Lu Feng's speed to be so heaven-defying. Turning to the Sovereign Immortal Master beside him, the Chaos Immortal Master asked, "Has Lu Feng always been this powerful and terrifying?" The Sovereign Immortal Master shook his head with a wry smile. Previously, when he was in the Sovereign Sacred Ground, his speed was the slowest. Then, after the transformation, his speed became incomparably terrifying. Previously, when he was in the Eternal Sacred Ground, he only took a day to enter the 18th level. Now, it seems like he's even more powerful than before. This time, it won't take long for him to enter the final level. The final level, it really was the final level. It was the final level of the 18-level Chaos Pagoda, and also the final level of Lu Feng's strength. This Lu Feng is really amazing. Back then, the Sovereign Emperor took almost a month to enter the 17th level. Now, it seems like he didn't even take a day. The crowd was truly astonished. Countless people were astonished because Lu Feng's speed at this moment had truly shocked them to the extreme. While they were talking, Lu Feng entered the 10th level in a frenzy once again. And this speed really caused endless tremors, causing everyone to go crazy. They had no choice but to go crazy. Could it be that the Pagoda of Trials no longer has any power? Why is it like this? There's no defense at all. What the hell is going on? Many people went crazy wanting to know the reason. However, at this moment, another voice finally answered their questions. It's still the chaos pagoda of trials. Countless illusions and torture to the soul are enough to make you sink into oblivion in an instant. I can assure you of this, because I just entered it not long ago. Many people fell silent, then nodded softly in the end. Then, the mysterious young man who just entered must be incomparably heaven-defying. I just don't know which final king he belongs to. Final king. Many people could only guess who the final king was. Everyone fell silent, looking at the figure who had already entered the 15th level. They were even more speechless after entering the 17th level. Lu Feng finally arrived at the final level. At this moment, Lu Feng vaguely understood something. He smiled faintly. Among the 3 divine kings' forbidden mythological domains, the most mysterious one is not the martial Tao avatar forbidden domain, nor the physical body forbidden domain, but the cultivation technique forbidden domain. So the truth behind the cultivation technique forbidden domain should be like this. It should be like this. Lu Feng gradually discovered the truth behind the cultivation technique forbidden domain. He knew that after he obtained the origin, he should be able to succeed. The cultivation technique forbidden domain, or it should be called the soul forbidden domain, Lu Feng had already seen the essence of the cultivation technique forbidden domain of the soul. Such a forbidden domain could not be obtained by studying the cultivation technique forbidden domain. Its true meaning was to open up the comprehension of the soul and raise the soul to the forbidden domain. This was the true essence of the 3 forbidden domains. The physical body forbidden domain. The martial Tao avatar forbidden domain. The soul cultivation technique forbidden domain. The 3 forbidden domains corresponded to the 3 main things a martial artist relied on to cultivate. After understanding this, Lu Feng's speed increased. Faintly, the endless suffering around him could no longer stir his emotions. This kind of suffering, in Lu Feng's eyes, was completely indifferent. In his eyes, there was only the front in a trance. The illusion appeared once again. Countless illusions appeared. However, Lu Feng seemed to turn a blind eye to it. There was only determination in his eyes. He only saw the front. Death, countless deaths, Shiyan Mu's death, Yu Qingran's death, his loved ones' deaths, his friends' deaths. Destruction, the universe's destruction, the human race's destruction, everything was destroyed. Such a scene made one's heart ache, it made one's soul tremble. However, in the face of this, Lu Feng was still Lu Feng. He ignored everything. He stubbornly held on. There was no change. He was still Lu Feng. However, tears could faintly be seen falling from those resolute eyes of his. Chapter 946. Although the countless illusions couldn't shake Lu Feng's foundation, nor could they shake Lu Feng's heart, they allowed him to see the possibility of the future. Lu Feng knew that if he didn't become stronger, if he didn't become really powerful, then all of this would happen in the future. His family, friends, and lovers would all die and become nothingness. They would be buried for all eternity. Lu Feng couldn't tolerate this. He couldn't watch this happen. Therefore, his steps became even more resolute. He allowed the endless pain to assault him and baptize him. However, there was an unprecedented determination in his eyes. All these illusions in my heart and in my eyes are nothing but illusions. How can I, Lu Feng, be defeated by these things? I firmly believe that my power can change everything. I firmly believe that I, Lu Feng, can protect everything that is worthy of my protection. Finally, the final step was taken, half a day. Just half a day and Lu Feng has completed it. The 3 great sacred lands, the 3 great trial pagodas, the 3 great pagodas that contain the secrets of the ultimate origin, have all disappeared in the distance. The ancient and mysterious training pagoda slowly disappeared, completely disappearing. Countless people were in a daze. Just like the existences of the 2 sacred lands, they were all in a daze. However, this couldn't stop the trial pagodas from disappearing. The trial pagodas that had existed in the primal chaos sacred lands for countless years and experienced 11 huge eras had disappeared. They had completely disappeared. Only one figure existed between heaven and earth. That figure stood there quietly, his eyes filled with an endless calmness. However, when his gaze swept across everyone couldn't help but tremble. Their souls couldn't help but tremble. When they looked into those eyes, they felt as though they were looking at an era. They felt as though they were looking at fate. They felt as though their fates were being dictated. How majestic! These words came out of their mouths unconsciously. After all, these existences had really been intimidated by Lu Feng's terror. They had really sunk into Lu Feng's calm eyes. At this moment, Lu Feng's power was recovering and growing stronger. In an instant, a divine king domain appeared. That was a physical body mythical taboo domain. That was an invincible physical body. The existence of the fleshly body could suppress heaven and earth and time, could be unbreakable in this world. This was Lu Feng's physical body, Lu Feng's invincibility. This did not shock many existences, because the current Lu Feng had truly entered an unsolvable realm. His recovery speed was so fast that an even more shocking scene unfolded before everyone's eyes. Martial Path Incarnation, Tongtian Futu, appeared. The heavenly stupa still appeared and bloomed between the heavens and earth. It was an eternal blessing, an endless mystery and obscurity, a fusion of the great origin and end. Its existence, from ancient times till now, was the ultimate. At another moment, a horrifying aura of battle power covered the area. All existences who came into contact with this aura unconsciously burned with the flames of madness in their hearts. They wanted to fight madly, to prove the glory of their existence. Battle power taboo ultimate domain. Chaos Immortal Master subconsciously said. This battle domain was the greatest, most mysterious, and most terrifying taboo domain since ancient times. Those who could enter this domain were qualified to break through the final shackles of the domain, the shackles of the sovereign. The current Lu Feng had truly displayed the aura of invincibility. This was the aura of the 33rd level of the ultimate sky. Chaos Immortal Master, Eternal Immortal Master, Supreme Immortal Master, and Guide. The 4 Immortal Masters were not like the people around them, who were shouting madly. They were just watching and waiting quietly. Because they knew that this was not Lu Feng's strongest state. This was just the aura he had before entering this place. In the Tower of Chaos, he had become stronger once again. Once again, he had undergone a shocking transformation. His strength should not be limited to the battle power of the 33rd level of the ultimate sky. Indeed, at the last moment, Lu Feng moved behind him. A shocking vision appeared. That was the beginning of the chaos, the birth of heaven and earth, the reset of time, a great existence that slowly walked out from the endless time and space. Everyone had seen it clearly. That was Lu Feng. That was Lu Feng's figure. But at that moment, Lu Feng did not seem to be Lu Feng, because his figure was filled with an aura that was too noble. It was the greatest aura of the sovereign of heaven and earth, the greatest aura of eternity. He had arrived, soul, taboo domain. This was a domain, a taboo domain. Lu Feng had finally done it. In an instant, the great emperor's figure merged with Lu Feng. In an instant, the invincible body released an extreme will. In an instant, the heaven-reaching Futu had sunk into Lu Feng's body. In an instant, the limit of his combat power was completely boosted. Lu Feng was invincible. He was truly invincible. He is invincible. This is the aura of a sovereign. This is the strongest aura of a sovereign. This was the aura of an unparalleled sovereign. He had actually reached this step. He had actually become such an existence. He actually did it. This is the half-step sovereign realm. This is the aura of the greatest sovereign. He succeeded. He really succeeded. Looking at the endless eras, this was the greatest realm. This aura, this greatness, this was definitely the pinnacle of half-step sovereigns. Such an existence, even in the primordial immortal devil era, would definitely be the greatest overlord that ruled heaven and earth. Lu Feng had returned. He had achieved great success. With a light step, he stepped out of the endless space. Lu Feng raised his hand and looked at his palm. He smiled. It was a faint smile. Is this who I am now? Even Lu Feng couldn't believe his current greatness. He also couldn't believe that he could possess such power. After all, he was only 30 years old. He was only 30 years old. Perhaps in the eyes of ordinary people, 30 years old was already middle-aged. However, in the eyes of martial artists, 30 years old didn't even have the possibility of stepping into the realm of experts. However, Lu Feng did it. He succeeded. I have really surpassed the human king realm primogenitor. The current Lu Feng had really surpassed the human king realm primogenitor of the past. He had surpassed the greatest human king realm primogenitor. No one had ever been able to compare to his achievements. This was Lu Feng, quietly sweeping his gaze. Endless majesty bloomed. It made all existences unconsciously want to submit. Even those as strong as immortal venerables couldn't help but tremble and submit. Finally, when Lu Feng saw the four immortal masters, an indescribable color appeared in their eyes. The supreme immortal master walked up to Lu Feng. Emperor, perhaps you should change the way you address me now. I should call you Emperor Lord, or Sacred Lord Emperor. In the ancient era, the supreme sovereign realm existences were the sovereigns. There were only 8 great existences. The 8 of them were the true sovereigns of the 8 great sacred grounds in the ancient era. They were called Sacred Lord level experts. Obviously, the current Lu Feng was already at the peak of the half-step sovereign realm. He was even qualified to be called a Sacred Lord level expert. Hearing this, Lu Feng smiled gently. However, he didn't realize that his smile could even affect the will of the heavens and earth. It could even change the order of time and space. This was Lu Feng's greatness and terror after the power was fully unleashed. He didn't answer, nor did he make any expression. In the next moment, Lu Feng's eyes looked into the distance. He looked at the place that belonged to the ancient era. It's time. The 3 immortal masters were slightly stunned. They looked at Lu Feng, not understanding why Lu Feng suddenly said such words. They looked in the direction Lu Feng was looking at. All they saw was an endless void. They didn't understand what Lu Feng was doing. They didn't understand why Lu Feng would say such words. Looking at Lu Feng, they were filled with countless questions. Lu Feng didn't seem to notice their expressions. His eyes only existed in front of him. Finally, after waiting for an unknown amount of time, Lu Feng's voice rang out again. It's time to end everything. End everything? End what? Many existences really didn't know what to do. They just looked at Lu Feng, extremely confused. But in the next moment, the 3 immortal masters seemed to understand something. They looked at Lu Feng in silence. Endless silence. Finally, the eternal immortal master looked at Lu Feng. There was an indescribable emotion in his eyes. Emperor, is it really time now? The Emperor of the past was also a quasi-dominator. He was also the greatest existence in the endless universe, but even with his battle prowess, he still failed. He once said that unless one had the battle prowess of a true dominator, it would be impossible to succeed in conquering the deepest part of the fallen land. Even a peak half-step dominator wouldn't be able to do it. So, the eternal immortal master didn't continue speaking. He just looked at Lu Feng quietly. Or perhaps, Lu Feng was truly powerful enough to suppress all historical eras. Unfortunately, the Emperor of the past had been at the same level as Lu Feng, but he had failed. So could Lu Feng succeed? Lu Feng looked at the eternal immortal master. The eternal immortal master was silent. His eyes were grave. Lu Feng looked at the sovereign immortal master and the chaos immortal master. They were the same. They were all silent. At this moment, Lu Feng smiled again. It was a smile of indescribable confidence. He looked into the distance and gently shook his head. Indeed, the Emperor is right. That oblivion abyss, that sealed land, is truly endlessly terrifying. That place is truly indescribably terrifying. I don't know how those damn demonic creatures got here, but I'm very familiar with their existence. I believe the Emperor. I believe that only a dominator can enter the deepest part of the fallen land. They can wipe out everything. And I'm only a peak half-step dominator. I'm still not a supreme dominator. But even so. But so what? Just now, I've already obtained the complete source of Futu. The existence of Futu, one of the most terrifying divine abilities, is Demon Buster. Chapter 947. One of the two greatest purposes of Futa's existence was to vanquish demons. Vanquish endless demonic creatures. Vanquish all demonic creatures. These demonic creatures referred to the demonic creatures that had sunk into the abyss. When they heard Lu Feng's words, an indescribable glint appeared in the eyes of the three immortal masters. They stared at Lu Feng and mumbled to themselves before asking slowly, "Can you really summon Futa's true body now?" These people could choose not to believe in Lu Feng's terror or Lu Feng's strength, but they had to believe in Futa's unparalleled power. This was a mighty existence that couldn't be recorded in history. Could only be passed down by word of mouth in the real world. It could only be mentioned in the memories of those sacred lands. This was Futu. Lu Feng still had the same incomparably calm expression as before. He was silent for a moment. A moment later, he gently shook his head and then nodded. The three of them looked at Lu Feng in confusion. Lu Feng finally answered their questions. "Unless I really enter the unparalleled ruler realm, then I can truly use the ultimate power of Futu. Only then can I rely on my own existence to summon Futu and suppress everything. Unfortunately, I am not the unparalleled ruler. Therefore, I cannot summon Futu by myself." The three of them fell silent for a moment before suddenly lifting their heads. They had heard it clearly. They had heard Lu Feng's words clearly. Lu Feng had said that he couldn't rely on his own existence to summon Futu. This meant that Lu Feng could rely on other people's help to summon Futu. When he saw the expressions of the three immortal masters, Lu Feng knew that they had understood. He chuckled and nodded his head directly. "Indeed, with the help of others, I can summon Futu and suppress everything. And this is my plan, this is what I think." This was Lu Feng's most fundamental thought. He was going to rely on the power of his main body to summon Futu and wipe out all the demons. The breathing of the immortal masters quickened slightly. It could be said that one of the purposes of the Holy Land's existence was to exterminate those demonic creatures. For countless eras, they had fought against the demonic creatures countless times, and each time they suffered heavy losses. Therefore, if there was a chance to wipe out the monsters, then they would not hesitate to give up everything. Lu Feng looked at them and continued, "Actually, the support I need is very simple. That is power. The support of endless power. Only then will I be able to summon the Buddha and use the Buddha's true form to suppress everything. I will be able to completely suppress the endless devil creatures in the sealed land. Endless power." The three immortal masters also understood this point. The existence of Futu surpassed the level of a supreme ruler. It was truly a supreme terror. Therefore, even though Lu Feng was only a half-step supreme ruler now, with the existence of Futu, he could really succeed. He could really succeed. And with the support of endless power, then Futu could really be activated. The sovereign immortal master looked at Lu Feng with hesitation in his eyes, but he still said it in the end. "Emperor, can we really succeed this time?" They had failed too many times, and they really did not want to experience failure and disappointment again. Moreover, if they failed this time, then the demonic creatures in the sunken land might be awakened. At that time, the whole of Universe 2 would be destroyed. Lu Feng looked at them, and after a moment of silence, he said, "I told you before that I met the eternal immortal master of the ancient End era in the sunken land. And there, I sensed that the revival of the demonic creatures had entered a frenzied state." Lu Feng had a strange feeling about the demonic creatures, and it was inseparable from his great demon true body. Therefore, Lu Feng was certain that the demonic creatures had been waiting for a long time, and were ready to truly appear. The eternal immortal master only suppressed the sunken land on the Yellow Spring continent. And on the 12 continents, there are places where demons are sealed. We do not have the 12 immortal masters to guard them one by one. So this time, we must take the initiative to attack. After hearing Lu Feng's words, they fell silent for a moment. Then, as if thinking of something, the guide suddenly looked at Lu Feng. "Emperor, we can wait for a while, wait for the heaven-defying spirits to awaken. Wait for them to return, the demonic creatures are a joke. We can wait." When he heard this, Lu Feng chuckled, and then burst out laughing. They will return in the end. However, it was impossible for them to return so early. And I am certain that before they return, the demonic creatures will completely break through the seal and enter the world. When that time comes, it will be irreversible. Irreversible, it will be irreversible. Once the demonic creatures enter the world, they will destroy everything. When that happens, the heaven-defying spirits will not be able to successfully revive. Now, there is no time to delay. We must fight for real. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. When they heard Lu Feng's tone, the atmosphere became even more solemn. They were the immortal masters of the 3 great holy lands, the most revered existence in this world. But when faced with a matter that could decide the future of countless living beings in the second universe, they hesitated. They really did not know what to do. Lu Feng did not speak, because he knew that he could not summon Fuda's true body with his own existence. Only with the help of the 3 great holy lands could he truly achieve everything. Only then could he truly destroy everything. Therefore, he must wait for the 3 great immortal masters to make their final decision. Time passed again. Finally, the 3 great immortal masters seemed to have made their decision. At this moment, they looked at each other and nodded firmly. "Lu Feng, you are right. We do not have any more time. If we fail this time, then our future will really be completely ruined. So this time, we are willing to believe, willing to give it our all, and really give it a try." He had really poured everything he had into this. Because failure represents an eternity of depravity. It means that all living beings and everything will fall into depravity. Lu Feng chuckled and nodded. But suddenly, Lu Feng's expression froze. The next moment, his figure disappeared. The 3 great immortal masters were slightly taken aback. They did not know what Lu Feng wanted to do. However, they knew that Lu Feng definitely had something very important to do. Therefore, they could only wait here quietly for Lu Feng. Of course, what they did not know was that Lu Feng really had something important to do. Lu Feng was going to meet someone with a single step. He could cross countless galaxy eras. This speed was countless times faster than traversing time and space. This was Lu Feng. Lu Feng's current power. Right now, he was a half-step sovereign, the pinnacle of the half-step sovereign realm. Between heaven and earth, in the universe, no forbidden zone could trap him in the slightest. In a few steps, Lu Feng had already traversed countless distances. Finally, he stopped. Lu Feng smiled faintly as he looked at the figure before him. Then, he waved his arm gently. In an instant, a giant garden with a circumference of tens of millions of miles appeared in the void. Everything was so vivid and lifelike. Everything had the life aura of the original body. With a wave of his hand, he had created a world full of life. This sort of method could no longer be described as shocking. The current Lu Feng was not much different from the supreme gods in the myths and legends who had created worlds and time and space. This was Lu Feng. This was Lu Feng's terror. When he sensed Lu Feng's movements, the figure took a step forward and arrived in front of Lu Feng. Then, he sat down in front of Lu Feng. As he slowly sat down, a stone chair was born in this world, and he sat down on it. Lu Feng also sat down in place. The two of them stared at each other solemnly. However, not long after, they smiled faintly. "I didn't expect that our first meeting would be here, under such an atmosphere," Lu Feng said with a sigh. Originally, he had thought that their first meeting would be in a vast void. After their meeting, they should have clashed fiercely. However, he had never imagined that their first meeting would be so simple. It could even be said that they were harmonious. When he heard Lu Feng's words, the figure smiled gently. He looked at Lu Feng and said slowly, "The first meeting between us was not here. This is not the first time we've met." Lu Feng raised his head and looked at him in astonishment. Lu Feng knew that, given his status and position, it was impossible for him to lie. However, even after thinking for a long time, Lu Feng still could not remember where or when they had met. His eyes were filled with endless thoughts. When he saw Lu Feng's expression, he smiled. Once again, he smiled gently. "You definitely can't remember. After all, I have only met you. However, you have not met me. To me, this is not the first meeting between us. However, to you, this is really the first meeting between us." Lu Feng continued to ponder. In the next moment, he seemed to have thought of something. His eyes were filled with a peculiar color. Lu Feng looked at him and said in an affirmative tone, "So, the person who was guarding the time and space secret realm, that great being, was talking about was you. Back then, it was you who saved me, monarch." Chapter 948. Back then, he had been so severely injured that he was on the verge of extinction. Lu Feng knew that his father couldn't save him. Even the Divine King couldn't. They didn't have such powerful means. Hence, they couldn't be the ones to save him. Since he had said so, there was no need to say more about the ones who had saved him. The Emperor looked at Lu Feng and finally nodded with a smile. "Actually, your existence isn't that easy to annihilate. I shouldn't have intervened. Even if I hadn't, you would have been able to recover in the end. But unfortunately, they came." "They?" Lu Feng thought for a moment and understood. Yes, God Punisher. Back then, he had annihilated God Punisher, Time Immortal Master. God Punisher was so powerful that it couldn't have just consisted of a few immortal masters. Hence, it was reasonable for them to send more great beings. It is indeed God Slayer. In the original universe, because my imprint still belongs to the immortal demon space, it is impossible for me to display my absolute power over there. The moment I step out of the battlefield in the outer domain, I will fall below the level of level 30. Even in the battlefield of the outer domain, my ultimate power is only at the fighting power of the 33rd level of the ultimate sky. Hence, I can only protect you. I can't do anything more. At that moment, an indescribable light appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. He looked at the Emperor, his eyes flashing. I already know that there is an epic Overlord in God Punisher, which is epic Immortal Master. However, I didn't expect their power to be so terrifying. Terrifying, this was truly incomparably terrifying. Even someone as powerful as the fighting power of the 33rd level of the ultimate sky could only protect him. Was the fighting power of God Punisher really that terrifying? The Emperor sighed softly and nodded. They are really powerful. The Emperor nodded slightly, but it seemed like he didn't want to say more. Lu Feng, I made an agreement with God Punisher. The battlefield of the outer domain belongs to me. Their ultimate great beings can't get close. Similarly, the price I had to pay was to help them keep their secret. Therefore, I can't tell you the secret of God Punisher. Lu Feng was silent. He knew that an existence like an emperor valued promises the most. Once they made a promise, they had to abide by it no matter what. Even if it was wrong, they still had to abide by it. However, Lu Feng also understood why the strongest person who had entered the Outland battlefield was only a peak temporal overlord, even though he knew that the Divine King was on God Punisher's side. It turned out that it was the Emperor's protection that prevented them from entering the Outland battlefield. At this point, the Emperor seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Lu Feng and asked, "You have now obtained the complete origin of Futu, right?" Lu Feng nodded. A hint of joy flashed through the Emperor's eyes. "Actually, back then, I did enter the 18th floor. I entered the 18th floor of the Soul Chaos Tower. And there I learned about everything. I know that the 18th floor of the Trial Tower of the Three Sacred Lands was prepared for one existence. Before you appeared, I thought it would be human King Liu Bei. However, I later discovered that it wasn't him, because I didn't sense Futu's aura on him. There wasn't even the slightest trace of Futu. Therefore, I knew that it wouldn't be human King Liu Bei. Later, I learned that the final preparations of the primordial immortal demon era, the endless remnants, were actually all prepared for you. Now you have finally gathered the complete origin of Futu. You can finally summon Futu. Then, I would like to ask two things of you." Lu Feng looked at the Emperor, still chuckling. He didn't let the Emperor finish his sentence. Lu Feng's voice rang out. "The first thing is to destroy the demons. The countless demonic creatures that have troubled countless living beings in space and time for countless years should be completely wiped out. The second thing is to open up time and space. Open up time and space that connects to the primordial universe." The Emperor was slightly taken aback. He hadn't expected Lu Feng to already know his request. However, an emperor was an emperor after all. He nodded his head gently without any expression of surprise. "That's right. The existence of these demons should also disappear. They should be completely dead. However, they are too powerful. Unless one of us can break through and enter the domain of a supreme ruler, we won't be able to defeat them. However, there isn't much time left. There really isn't much time left. I believe that once you enter the half-step sovereign realm, you'll be able to sense it, right? You should have already sensed the powerful will that is slowly awakening in the depths of the earth." Lu Feng nodded lightly. He had made such a decision because he had sensed the terrifying fluctuations of power in the depths of the earth. Otherwise, with his current realm and strength, using the power of Futu once would require a great deal of effort. The Emperor nodded lightly. Those terrifying existences of the devil race should be waking up soon. Perhaps you, me, the Divine King, the Holy King, the Immortal King, and the Demon King, the 6 ultimate kings of the taboo, have all entered the domain of a pseudo-ruler. However, when faced with those demons, we are still unable to do anything. Indeed, Lu Feng, under your limit, you are a level stronger than the 5 of us. You are almost at the peak of a pseudo-ruler. However, when faced with a sea of pseudo-ruler level demons, you will still be unable to do anything. Even if we combine our strengths, we still won't be able to do anything. There's only one trump card we can rely on, and that's the Buddha. Therefore, this time, we can only rely on you." Lu Feng nodded without hesitation. Back then, he had promised the ancient End Era's eternal immortal master that when he was strong enough, he would return and suppress all the demons. Although he didn't have the power to sweep through everything, in terms of wiping out the demons, relying on Futu's existence, he could still do it. In addition, Lu Feng knew from history how terrifying these demons were. This was a calamity that could completely destroy the world. The 33 layers of heaven, how vast was the area? However, under the erosion of these demons, almost all of it had sunk and become a land of decay. This already showed how terrifying and evil the demons were. No matter what the reason was, Lu Feng had to take action this time. I've calculated. It's impossible to do it by myself. Although I've gathered Futa's origin, I have Futa's main body, but its existence is too great and extreme. It's not something I can do as I wish. Therefore, I need help. I need the endless power of the three holy lands. Only in this way can I truly summon the Buddha and use its true power. This is the reason why I joined forces with the immortal masters of the three holy lands. The Emperor nodded gently. Then I'll go back with you. I think they will believe some of my words. Although Lu Feng's true combat strength had already surpassed that of an emperor's, Lu Feng's current combat strength had already surpassed that of an emperor. Unfortunately, in the minds of those existences, the emperor was obviously more reliable and trustworthy than Lu Feng. After all, Lu Feng was still too young. As for the five ultimate kings, they were all great symbols that had transcended eras and epochs. They were the symbols that supported their spirit and strength. Strictly speaking, these five ultimate kings were actually older than everyone else. They were the true ancient existences. Hearing this, Lu Feng smiled and nodded. He didn't care about these things. Moreover, the current Lu Feng really didn't want to wait any longer. After knowing that there was an existence with the combat strength of the ultimate heaven of the 33rd layer in God Punisher, Lu Feng really couldn't wait any longer. He really wanted to go back immediately. After all, there were too many things he cared about there. With a wave of his arm, the world that had appeared earlier instantly disappeared and turned into nothingness. With a light step, Lu Feng had already walked out. The Emperor did the same. His speed was also shockingly fast. In just an instant, the two of them had returned. At this moment, the three immortal masters were still standing there quietly, waiting for Lu Feng's return. However, this time, when they saw Lu Feng's figure, they were stunned. Because they had already seen the Emperor beside Lu Feng. Emperor, the sovereign immortal master softly spat out two words. At this moment, the countless immortal kings and immortal venerables in the surroundings were stunned. Previously, when they saw that Lu Feng was accompanied by someone, they could vaguely sense that this person must have a powerful identity. However, no matter how exaggerated their imaginations were, they would never have imagined that the person accompanying them would be the legendary, almighty Emperor. Looking at them, the Emperor was still calm. He nodded lightly and looked at the Sovereign Immortal Master. Sovereign Immortal Master, this time I came here because of the matter that Lu Feng mentioned earlier. He is right. Perhaps you all haven't sensed it, but as quasi-dominators, we have already sensed it. It can be said that relying on Lu Feng to summon Futu to directly suppress those demonic creatures is not only the safest and fastest way, it is also the only way. Even if the six of us combine forces, we still won't be able to fight against all the demonic creatures that have awakened. Moreover, they are really on the verge of awakening. It can be said that this is our only chance. Although these words were directed at the Sovereign Immortal Master, the other Chaos Immortal Masters and Eternal Immortal Masters also understood that the Emperor was actually telling the three Immortal Masters. Silence. Everyone was silent. At this moment, they really didn't know what to do. After all, if they failed, the consequences would be unbearable. If we fail, then all the demonic creatures underground will be completely awakened. At that time, there will be no turning back. Therefore, this time we must succeed. Chapter 949. Sovereign Immortal Master looked at Lu Feng. His meaning was very clear. He wanted to know if Lu Feng could guarantee success. After all, if he failed, then the second universe, or even the original universe, would be in danger. Countless shocking demonic creatures would be born, and before those heaven-defying souls of war returned, they would not be able to resist. And if these demonic creatures were allowed to wreak havoc, then those heaven-defying souls of war would not be able to return at all. They would not even have to wait for the arrival of the final calamity. They would all be annihilated. The three immortal masters, their guides, as well as many immortal kings and immortal venerables, all focused their gazes on Lu Feng. They were waiting for Lu Feng's reply. As for the Emperor, he finally looked at Lu Feng. This was because, at this moment, he also did not dare to believe. Feeling everyone's gaze, Lu Feng smiled. It was a faint, gentle smile. His eyes were shining with a strange brilliance. Looking at the people around him, Lu Feng finally spoke slowly. Although I was born in the original universe, although I am an existence in the original universe, however, this second universe existed to help the original universe. It can be said that if this place falls, then even if the demonic creatures do not enter the original universe, the final outcome will be the annihilation of all living beings in the original universe. Lu Feng sighed softly. At this moment, his eyes were finally filled with an indescribable determination. In the original universe, there are too many things that I have to protect. I cannot watch them disappear just like that. I cannot watch them perish just like that. They are the greatest meaning of my life. I, Lu Feng, cannot let them lose their future like this. So this time I can only succeed. Failure is not an option. If he failed, then it would mean that all hope would disappear. Lu Feng would definitely not allow such a thing to happen. So, even if there was no other way, he still had to think of a way. Moreover, Lu Feng trusted Tong Tianfudu. He trusted Tong Tianfudu, his greatest comrade who had accompanied him all the way to his current level. He believed that Tong Tianfudu wouldn't let him down. He wouldn't let him fail. This time, I won't fail. I definitely won't fail. I will definitely not fail. I will not allow failure to happen. Even if I have to die, I will not allow any failure to happen. This was Lu Feng. This was what he was thinking at the moment. It was as if they were influenced by Lu Feng's current state. It was as if Lu Feng's decisiveness had given them an incomparably firm belief. At this moment, these people truly believed, completely believed. They completely believed Lu Feng's words. Alright, since that's the case, let's head straight to the Sea Eye of the demonic creatures. That's where the demonic creatures gather the most, and where the biggest seal is located. We three immortal masters will use the final trump cards of the three great holy lands. We will let the three great holy lands display their true power. The moment we arrive will be the moment to end the countless years of fate. It will be the moment we settle all our past grievances. In an instant, the three immortal masters disappeared. Lu Feng vaguely understood something. He took a deep breath and looked at the Emperor beside him. The Sea Eye of the demonic creatures is the center of the demonic creatures, right? Then, let's go there directly. I think you've been waiting for this day for countless years. Among the 5 ultimate kings, the one who hated the demonic creatures the most was the Emperor. After all, his master, the eternal immortal master of the ancient End era, had been tortured for countless years because of the demonic creatures. The Emperor chuckled, but Lu Feng could feel the coldness in his smile. Then let's head out. There should be quite a number of demonic creatures there by now. Exterminating them before truly wiping them out will be a way to collect some interest in advance. With that, the Emperor took a step forward and left the area. Lu Feng smiled faintly as he watched him leave. Then, he followed closely behind him and left as well. The Sea Eye of the demonic creatures was located outside of the 12 great continents, between the 3 great holy lands. According to legend, this place was directly connected to the core of the demonic creatures. The Sea Eye of the demonic creatures was the most concentrated here. In previous eras, the 12 great continents would join forces with the 3 great holy lands and gather countless powerhouses to exterminate the demonic creatures there. Today, Lu Feng was here for the first time. This was the location of the first forbidden area of the second universe. This is the Sea Eye of the demonic creatures. As expected, this name is too apt. Lu Feng sighed softly as he looked at the terrifying abyss passageway in front of him. It was hundreds of millions of kilometers wide. This was an abyss located in the middle of the demonic creatures. It was like the Sea Eye of the demonic creatures. Inside, there was endless darkness. Nothing could be seen or sensed. Outside the Sea Eye of the demonic creatures, there was an endless amount of dark aura emerging and emerging. Faintly, the aura of decay had begun to infect the space. Vaguely, Lu Feng could see many powerful demonic creatures crawling out of the Sea Eye of the demonic creatures. Their bodies weren't that large, but their strength was incomparably terrifying. Almost all of them were terrifying existences above the immortal realm. Many of the ones that came out later had even reached the true immortal realm and sky immortal realm. If such a large number of demonic creatures were to be released, it would truly be a disaster. Lu Feng sighed softly. The emperor beside him was only endlessly cold. He nodded and looked at Lu Feng. Lu Feng, since you entered the quasi-ruler realm, you haven't truly used your power even once. You should know that the quasi-ruler realm's power is too terrifying. It's simply impossible to use it wantonly. Otherwise, the annihilation caused would be truly endless. However, it's clear that this is a good opportunity. Do you want to give it a try? Seeing the coldness in the emperor's eyes, Lu Feng only smiled lightly. A trace of sharpness flashed in his eyes as he nodded. That's right. Now, it's just the right time to test the extent of my power. These demonic creatures will be my imaginary enemies in the future. His power began to continuously recover. After obtaining such a powerful physical body and entering such a level, Lu Feng could stay in the forbidden mythological domain for a few days. Thus, until now, he still hadn't exited that domain. Looking at the demonic creatures that filled the sky, Lu Feng's power finally rose to the limit. Behind him, an endless dynasty appeared faintly. Then, the dynasty actually evolved into an era. This era was truly an era. It was filled with countless complete auras, and all types of wills were intertwined. It was trillions of kilometers in diameter. This was more than 1,000,000 times stronger than the era that Lu Feng had evolved into. Lu Feng's figure disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared again. However, the place he appeared in this time belonged to an endless mystery. It was an endless majesty, a pinnacle, and even an eternal place. Above the supreme imperial city is the emperor's world. Lu Feng, compared to me, your noble aura is even more terrifying. At this moment, even the emperor had to admit that Lu Feng's emperor aura was even more terrifying than his own. Our emperor bloodline is the inheritance of the greatest him. Clearly, you are closer to him than I am. Or perhaps, you will really become another him. Lu Feng slowly walked out of the imperial city. His eyes were filled with endless tranquility. In the next moment, Lu Feng gently raised his arm. He gently pointed his finger in front of him, at what moment, countless forces were stirred up. Countless existences went crazy. All the origin, intent, and power were stirred up. They were completely rioting. They all turned into eternal power and frantically poured down on the demonic Sea destruction. It was truly destruction. It was endless, it was indescribable, and it was the ultimate destruction. It caused the entire world to sink into oblivion. It caused the entire era to tremble in fear. This was the power of a quasi-ruler. This was the strongest state of a quasi-ruler. At this moment, Lu Feng was the epitome of what it meant to destroy the world. What it meant to destroy the ultimate power of all things. The emperor's eyes were filled with an astonishing light. No one could understand what he was thinking at this moment. The moment Lu Feng was stirred up, the immortal masters of the three great holy lands, who were preparing everything and activating their ultimate trump cards, were all stunned. They all felt the ultimate annihilation. They all looked in the same direction. They were looking in the direction of the demonic sea eye. It seems that Lu Feng and the Emperor have already made their move. Then we have to hurry. I hope that this time, we won't fail. The demonic sea eye, which was hundreds of billions of miles in diameter, didn't disappear. However, the decaying aura and the destructive existences all disappeared. They were all annihilated. Countless primal chaos reappeared and gradually began to fill the place where the demonic creatures had retreated. With this attack, Lu Feng directly entered the demonic sea eye, who knows how many billions of miles away. Everything within was annihilated and disappeared. Who knows how many billions, tens of millions, or even trillions of terrifying demonic creatures were annihilated by this attack. Below is the world of demonic creatures. Any power that enters will be weakened to the ultimate degree. There is almost no power left. However, your era of the Emperor is terrifying to such an extent. You actually annihilated everything. Lu Feng, it seems that one of the purposes of your existence is to exterminate these demonic creatures. Lu Feng chuckled. His eyes were incomparably indifferent. He naturally knew that the reason he was able to achieve such an achievement was inseparable from his body and the great demonic power he possessed. The great demonic true body was completely created to restrain demonic creatures. Therefore, he was able to reach such a level. He could truly shock the world and accomplish a feat that the Emperor and the other four ultimate kings couldn't accomplish. In the distance, endless turbulence came. Those were three violent waves that caused the endless primal chaos to churn and caused the entire space-time to fluctuate wildly. This was a power that surpassed any other. It was an indescribable feeling of vastness. Lu Feng was slightly surprised. This power was much more terrifying than the power he had just used. What he had used was the power of a true quasi-dominator. The power of a quasi-dominator was already a kind of limit. It belonged to the true strongest power in the universe. However, even so, it still couldn't compare to the three waves of power just now. One could imagine the shock in Lu Feng's heart. Glancing at the Emperor beside him, Lu Feng saw that he was smiling mysteriously. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Emperor, these three waves of power should have been enough. It should have been the power of the three great holy lands, right? It should have been the power of the three great holy lands. However, I don't understand why the waves of the holy lands would be like this. I need them to provide enough power to help me summon the existence of Futu. But how exactly did they do it?" Lu Feng looked at the Emperor. The Emperor was full of smiles. He shook his head gently and said slowly, "You will know in a moment. I won't tell you now. Of course, I have only heard of it. I have never truly seen it. Therefore, I dare not be certain what will appear." When he heard this, the confusion between Lu Feng's brows deepened. He looked at the Emperor. After a moment of silence, he nodded gently. In the distance, the demonic sea eye hadn't emitted any aura of decay for a long time. When he saw this, the Emperor's strange look became even more intense. The Emperor's expression had changed many times. He wasn't doing it deliberately, but Lu Feng's performance at the moment was too much. He couldn't help but be shocked. Chapter 950. Back then, when he had become a quasi-sovereign, he had tried to enter to exterminate the endless demonic creatures. After all, he was the ultimate king, the taboo king. In the ancient immortal devil era, as long as he obtained one of the origins, he would be able to break through the final shackles and become a truly great existence. He would become a true supreme sovereign. Now, even without an origin, he was still at the peak of the quasi-sovereign realm. Throughout the endless eras, he was still at the peak of the sovereign realm. However, Even a powerful and terrifying existence like him had failed after entering this place. He couldn't even reach the lowest level and truly face the most terrifying existences among the demonic creatures. It was also from then on that the Emperor truly understood the terror of these demonic creatures. He also understood that unless one was a supreme sovereign, it was absolutely impossible to enter the depths and destroy everything. He knew all this, so he understood even more clearly the terrifying power contained in Lu Feng's attack just now. His era of the Emperor was actually able to suppress these demonic creatures to such an extent. Lu Feng's strength left a deep impression in the Emperor's heart for the first time. Both of them had their own thoughts. They were both silent as they waited quietly. Gradually, Lu Feng sensed the emergence of a terrifying majestic aura. He didn't see anything, but he couldn't ignore the vague feeling that he was getting from the underworld. Lu Feng's eyes flickered as he looked in three directions. After waiting for a long time, Lu Feng was shaken. He was truly shaken. At this moment, he looked at the Emperor beside him. Amidst the turmoil, he was incomparably shocked. "Is this the truth you spoke of?" Upon hearing Lu Feng's words, the Emperor smiled faintly. However, there was a faint complexity in his smile. He nodded, but a moment later, he shook his head gently. "I know and have heard about the last hope and legacy of the three great Holy Land. However, I didn't expect their final trump card to be so shocking. It was truly incomparably shocking, because at this moment, Lu Feng was looking at three great phantoms, three truly terrifying phantoms that covered the heavens and the earth, truly shrouded this era. From afar, they slowly moved towards Lu Feng from three different directions. Finally, they slowly moved towards him. So this is what they left behind in the end. So this is the true appearance of the three Holy Lands. The true existence of the three Holy Lands is actually like this. Lu Feng had seen it clearly. He really understood it. Perhaps others might not understand, but how could he, who had seen all the history of the past, not know? He naturally knew what this represented. He naturally knew what it was. In the primordial immortal devil era, it was a peerless battleship that once conquered the final destination. It was the ultimate battleship that carried countless lives. In the primordial immortal devil era, such a warship continent only belonged to a great existence. At that time, the battleship continent he used was slightly larger than the current three Holy Lands, but only by a little. The existence of the three Holy Lands is indeed a remnant of the primordial immortal devil era, worthy of being their trump card. With the existence of these three great warship continents, after carrying countless lives, it is enough to conquer any space-time domain. From what he had seen before, Lu Feng naturally understood how terrifying this warship continent was. This meant that it could conquer any location, and it could do so almost without suffering any casualties. Such terror was completely beyond the imagination of any living being. The Emperor didn't look at Lu Feng, because his eyes were fixed on the warship continent, that incomparably terrifying world of warships. His voice gradually rang out. Yes, this great sacred relic can only be created in the primordial immortal devil era. It belongs to those great existences, the supreme ruler expending countless resources to create it. This is worthy of being called a peerless miracle, a world-shaking sacred relic. Although they are not artifacts, their existence is something that other than the Buddha, no other artifact can compare to. If they must be given a rank, then it would be Grade 13. Grade 13, that was the level that the totems of the Great Desolation had briefly touched upon at their peak. That was the level that human King Liu Bei couldn't achieve even with all his efforts to create the human King Palace. They were all Grade 13 existences of that level. At this moment, Lu Feng understood. Just now, he had sensed the shocking fluctuations from the three great warships. At the time, he had been very suspicious. After all, those fluctuations had shocked him greatly. They were much more powerful than the era of the Emperor he had just used. Such a powerful force shouldn't have appeared. However, now that he had seen the shocking Grade 13 warship continent, all his doubts had dissipated. Lu Feng let out a long sigh as he looked around at the immortal Devil continent, which was as large as hundreds, or even tens of thousands, of superplanetary systems. His heart burned with passion. With such a trump card, what are we afraid of? What are we afraid of? As long as we rely on these existences, we will be able to face anything with the greatest strength. Lu Feng was very clear about the significance of the 3 warship continents. Once they were controlled by a suitable existence, the power they could unleash would not be inferior to that of a true supreme ruler. The Emperor nodded gently. At this moment, he was also extremely shocked. Although he knew about the existence of such a legacy, this was the first time he had seen it. The 3 boundlessly huge warship continents floated around the demonic sea eye in the void, quietly existing there. In the next moment, 3 figures appeared on top of them. With a light step, they arrived beside Lu Feng and the Emperor. These 3 people were the 3 immortal masters. Only the immortal masters of the 3 holy lands could use this trump card and reveal this shocking divine relic to the world. Looking at Lu Feng, the sovereign immortal master nodded gently and said, "Lu Feng, we have already used all of the holy lands' trump cards. If we fail, what we will lose is not just this era, but all of eternity, the future of all living beings." Lu Feng's expression gradually turned solemn. He knew that the sovereign immortal master was not joking. It was the truth. Therefore, Lu Feng's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. "I understand, sovereign immortal master. This time, failure is not allowed for you. Isn't it the same for me? Similarly, I don't have the ability to accept failure." They all knew that what Lu Feng said was true. They also nodded gently, looked at the Emperor, and finally looked at Lu Feng. "Then, what should we do?" Lu Feng turned and looked at the endless sea of demonic creatures. In the next moment, he smiled. It was a smile that was endlessly cold and filled with shocking killing intent. "All you need to do is to continuously inject power into Futu after I summon it. I believe that with the existence of the 3 holy lands, Futu's power can be fully unleashed and truly destroy everything." Hearing Lu Feng's words, the 3 immortal masters nodded lightly and returned to the 3 holy lands. They were the immortal masters of the 3 holy lands. The power of the holy lands could only be used by them. Seeing that the 3 immortal masters were in position, Lu Feng finally focused all of his attention on the sea of demonic creatures in front of him. Gradually, a bright color appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. It was a kind of madness, a kind of faith, and even an indescribable trust and complex emotions. Finally, the power and aura around Lu Feng's body began to recover. It was the most powerful recovery. In an instant, Lu Feng's aura reached a peak. This was the ultimate realm of the ultimate sky of the 33 layers, which belonged to the quasi-ruler realm. However, everything wasn't over yet. How could the current Lu Feng end just like this? His terror had only just begun, and it had only just begun. Vaguely, Lu Feng's aura became even more terrifying. It was unbelievable. In this way, he had undoubtedly surpassed his previous limits and entered a whole new level. And this level was the Supreme Ruler. Shock. Complete and utter shock. Within the 3 holy lands, every single existence was shocked. In the face of Lu Feng, the Supreme Sovereign Lord, all existences had to be devoutly worshipped and prostrated. This was Lu Feng. This was the ultimate power that belonged to Lu Feng. It was matchless and invincible. Supreme Ruler. Is this the aura of a Supreme Ruler? How great! He is really invincible. Vast heaven and earth, endless time and space, the eternal universe. My existence is unique and eternal. I am an existence that even the universe has to avoid. This is the Supreme Ruler realm. The Supreme Ruler was the ruler above all else. Their existence was only to rule over other living things. They would never be ruled by any other existence. Time seemed to stop as Lu Feng gently extended his arm. Lu Feng shut his eyes slightly. Right now, he didn't need to do anything else. All he had to do was communicate with his closest comrade, who had accompanied him for decades in his mind space. Finally, a hazy figure appeared behind Lu Feng. This was the Martial Path Incarnation, which was also known as the Immortal Demon Vision. Previously, when Lu Feng had displayed his ultimate power, this Martial Path Incarnation had also appeared. However, it hadn't been as real as it was now, as if it had a physical body. Furthermore, the Martial Path Incarnation that had appeared this time was full of will and majesty. The word terrifying couldn't even begin to describe it. This isn't an immortal demon vision at all. This is, in fact, a Buddha. Chapter 951. This was, in fact, the existence of the Buddha. Although it looked like a Martial Path Incarnation, this was because Lu Feng hadn't used all of his power. Or rather, all of his power wasn't enough to fully manifest Futu. The existence of Futu is too great and extreme. Lu Feng's power is only at the pseudo-sovereign level. He simply can't manifest it completely. After all, Futu is a grade 14 existence. The 14th rank represented the ultimate greatness of spacetime since ancient times. The greatness of a paragon was something that no other paragon could ever hope to compare to. Therefore, even if Lu Feng used all of his power, he still wouldn't be able to fully manifest Futu. Many existences understood that unless Lu Feng really entered the legendary sovereign realm, it was impossible. It was completely impossible. Turning around and looking at the three holy lands, the Emperor's voice suddenly rang out. Now it's time. You can start providing that endless power. This time, Futu will truly appear in the world and prove its unparalleled greatness to all living beings in the world. In an instant, the three holy lands seemed to hear Lu Feng's voice. In an instant, endless power surged and started a frenzied riot. The power that filled the sky gathered and kept rushing in Lu Feng's direction. This was an endless amount of power, an ultimate power that could shake space and time. In an instant, Lu Feng was bathed in a world formed by endless power. His eyes were slightly closed, but the sky-piercing Futu behind him kept growing bigger and bigger. Lu Feng's sky-piercing Futu had always been about 10,000 feet or so. But now, the sky-piercing Futu had far exceeded 10,000 feet. Moreover, it was still increasing, and it was still increasing. Countless existences looked at the towering ancient pagoda, and their eyes were filled with trembling emotions. As the sky-piercing Futu continued to grow, they could faintly feel the majesty of this sky-piercing Futu. As its size continued to grow, the entire sky-piercing Futu emitted a shocking wave of power. An indescribable sense of mystery began to appear and be born. Vaguely, there was an endless and hazy feeling of origin and end. This was something that involved fate, entangled karma, interpreted faith, and obliterated vanity. This was the greatest symbol of the world and the origin of all existences. Shocking, it was truly incomparably shocking. However, in the next moment, something even more shocking happened. Countless existences raised their heads to look at the sky. Looking at the horrifying phenomenon that finally tore open the primordial chaos, all of them were truly dumbfounded. At this moment, the Babel Stupa was already far too big. Its height had already surpassed the limit, reaching a height of 100 million feet. However, it was not over yet. It was still not over. This was because it was still absorbing, continuously absorbing endless power. In an instant, another height of 100 million feet appeared, the three holy grounds shook violently. Countless existences had solemn looks on their faces. However, there was a hint of madness in their eyes. They did not care about the collapse of the Holy Lands at all. It was as if they could not see anything. What existed in their eyes was only the constantly growing and terrifying sky-piercing Futu. Finally, it's going to appear. Since ancient times, the greatest existence, the legendary ultimate incarnation that surpassed the 14th grade, the supreme ultimate terror, the one that created everything, the one that suppressed the final 33 heavens for countless years, the one that suppressed the lord of demonic creatures for countless years, is finally going to appear outside the 33 heavens for the first time. The Emperor muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with endless shock. Shock, shock, it was an endless shock. Countless existences were horrified, and thoroughly horrified. Finally, the existence of Futu stopped expanding, stopping its endless expanse. At this moment its size was 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999. 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, 999, this was the limit. He was just a little bit away from breaking through the 1 billion mark. However, at the final 10 feet, he stopped. He stopped completely. At this moment, Futu was truly complete. It had reached the limit of Futu. Its greatness was truly indescribable. It existed quietly between heaven and earth, connecting to the endless eternity. Its existence was the interpretation of eternity, the truth of eternity between heaven and earth. This was Futu, the greatest existence that had once suppressed the lord of magical creatures, the greatest existence that had suppressed the 33 levels of heaven. The powerful image had completely appeared. It had completely materialized. It was at this moment that all the power in the world surged. It was a surge of worship. Countless powers were absorbed by Futu on their own. The power of endless time and space, the power of countless eras, and the existence of chaos were all attracted. All of them flocked towards this power. Between the 12 continents was a world of chaos. However, at this moment, before the guidance of Futu, it was all turbulent. Everything was condensed, everything was condensed. This was greatness, this was the true unparalleled greatness of eternity. On the 12 continents, not only were there immortal kings, but even the most ordinary mortals could feel the existence of this power, the crystallization of this power. They could feel that in the distant place, in the endless eternity, there was a great existence that had awakened. Although they did not know what it was, or what kind of unparalleled power it had, they could understand. It was truly the greatest ultimate existence in all of eternity. Trembling, worshipping, chanting, devout, this was the only thought in the heart of the existence of nothingness. It was also their only thought. Finally, it has awakened. I have waited for countless years. Finally, it has come, the final moment of everything has come. For so long we have forgotten everything. We have destroyed everything. We have lost everything. Now it has finally awakened. It has finally shone brightly once more. It has guided us to the final destination. The moment Futu was fully formed, countless terrifying existences, not only in the second universe, but also in the original universe and in the mysterious forbidden lands were awakened. They were all fully awakened. This day was destined to be a day of turmoil for the universe. A world-shaking crack appeared in Gufang's star. But the humans who were focused on the true battlefield had no time to pay attention to it. In the depths of the universe, in the darkness of time and space, a roar shook the space and time. It was a furious roar that affected the order of time and space. In the mysterious center of the universe, in the legendary eternal sacred land, where no one had ever been before, the human king's eyes were filled with a mix of excitement and complexity. He turned to look at the figure in the ice coffin and sighed softly. The feeling of turmoil continued. Heaven and earth rolled endlessly. Even the air was shaking. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. However, what welcomed the arrival of the end of the world was the most respectful praise and the most persistent worship of countless creatures. The boundless Buddha, the most majestic Buddha that was over 900 million feet tall, stood there quietly. Finally, beneath the majesty of the Buddha, an existence that was equally majestic woke up. Lu Feng opened his eyes. At this moment, his figure began to blur, but it was still there. He was clearly standing there, but it was as if he had completely disappeared from his original spot. An indescribable feeling emerged from the illusory figure. The illusory figure quietly merged with the illusory figure. In an instant, the Babel Stupa had finally become real. After waiting for endless time, I have finally waited for this day. After countless years, I have finally waited for this day. Eternity, eternal life, eternity. What is eternity? My existence, Futu, is eternity. Lu Feng's eyes flickered with a frightening glint. At this moment, his turbulence was completely indescribable. His strength, his terror, his extremity, it was as if he was heavenly Futu. He was the complete fusion of heavenly Futu. He was a 14th rank existence. He was the only existence in the endless universe who could compare to him. He was the only existence who could temporarily remain at that level. At this moment, Lu Feng was unprecedentedly powerful. He looked ahead, at the eye of the sea of demonic creatures in the endless abyss. Finally, he waved his arm. Futu! Demon Buster! Futu was the Demon Buster. One of Futu's greatest abilities. It was the pinnacle of power that could wipe out all demonic creatures in the world. According to legend, it was the eternal power that could wipe out the endless eras. It's here, it's really here. Demon Buster. That's the Demon Buster. An ancient inheritance, the greatest power. Under its ripples, all demonic creatures will be wiped out. The three immortal masters roared, their faces ferocious. Their endless terror was filled with an indescribable turbulence. Even the Emperor was going crazy at this moment. In the distant era, in the endless era of immortals and demons, your existence truly suppressed all demonic creatures. Even a mighty existence like the Lord of demonic creatures was suppressed by you. Now, are you finally going to display that greatest power of the past? The Demon Buster had appeared, wiping out all demonic creatures. Lu Feng raised his hand. Just like that, he seemed to have become one with Futu. He was Futu and Futu was him. When he lowered his hands, he was truly annihilated. Just like that, the pagoda, which was only 10 feet away from 1 billion feet, landed in the eye of the demonic sea. Although Futu had already reached such a terrifying height, but compared to the eye of the sea of demonic creatures, which was hundreds of billions of miles in diameter, it was still much, much, much smaller. But despite its small size, it gave off a feeling that even the heavens and earth couldn't contain it. It was a terror that even the heavens and earth couldn't obstruct. It really landed in the eye of the sea of demonic creatures. In an instant, many existences from the 3 holy lands flew out in a frenzy, following closely behind the terrifying Buddha. Together, they flew madly towards the depths of the demonic sea eye. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.